Right. Hello, everybody. Um, yeah, I've got the perfect intro screen for this. So, this is the pre-election special of the Blob Watch. Um, and I haven't listed it in any number or order because this is like going to be part of the special playlist. Um, but what we've got is so tonight we've got Turnip Merchant coming in. But also, we were meant to have Charlemagne. Unfortunately, he's having some technical issues on his end, so he won't be joining us tonight. But we still got Turnip Merchant turning up in probably about what does he say, 5 minutes. So yeah, we got him turning up in 5 minutes. So that should be good. Um, yeah, so tonight what we're going to be discussing is the um, polling methodology because there's been some. I've been sort of going down the rabbit hole of the polling companies that are being used at the moment by the mainstream media in the US, but also here in the UK as well. But also looking at the alternative polling agencies, which seem to be leaning more Republican. And this is the thing, because one thing you notice about the polling agencies is we all know that CNN, MSNBC, and all those lots, they all have their own bias, left wing bias, Democrat bias, which I'll show you in two ticks. But we that's sort of a given thing, and obviously it creates a bubble, like this bubble atmosphere, and it's how the same pundits didn't predict the 2016 victory for Trump because they were still stuck in that bubble and they weren't able to reach a decent percentage of the population. And when we go through the numbers tonight, and looking at the conflicting polling data from each company, we'll be able to see the same pattern and sort of history repeating itself. So we're going to be looking first at the CNN poll, which has been conducted by a company called SSRS, which we are told are the gold standards of polling agencies. So we'll have a look at that in a sec when Turnip Merchant turns up. But before that, we're going to just going to say shout out to the Discord server for the British Museum and the Basket Weavers. As always, the links will be in the description below after the video at the end of the stream, and we will, as I said, that will be there. I think it's a limited time. The Discord links can be up, so once shared. So yeah, click on that, join it if you haven't. Really cool, quite great conversations going on there. So check that out, and oh yeah, and also check out the last stream I did with Harry as well. That's on The Witcher. If you're a fan of The Witcher or all that sort of nerdy shit, yeah, go and listen to that. But so we got that, so that sort of shitting out the way. So yeah, we're going to be looking at SSRS polling. We're also going to be looking at Target Early, which is quite an interesting one because that one was designed by the Democrats and it's actually a bit more critical. The results are coming through are what we're seeing with Koto Goldberg. Koto Godfrey, even, who you don't know is actually a very he's a YouTuber, political commentator, and he has been looking through the numbers, especially in his home state, Florida, when it comes to early voting and in-person early voting, and like the postal voting and all that sort of stuff. So he's been looking at that. Interesting stuff coming out, especially in the Democrat areas of this Miami-Dade and such, because it looks like the Democrats are not in the initial early voting are not coming out in enough numbers, which would suggest that they would need to flip the state. Now, obviously, the pushback from that is, well, they're not. It could be that the Republicans are just going to cannibalize, the vote, and all the Republicans are going to vote early, and then on election day, the big blue Democrat turnout will come out, and places like Florida and Georgia and North Carolina and the Rust Belt states are all going to come out, vote blue, and Biden's in office. But there's multiple conflicting theories to that plan, and one of them, which is the most obvious one that I know of, is that a lot of Republicans have been putting out there. Well, actually, first of all, let's just start. Traditionally, the Republicans don't vote early and don't vote by mail. They like to come out on election day to vote. There's multiple reasons for that. It varies on state to state. One of the reasons that I've been told is that in certain states, especially like Pennsylvania, I think also, I want to say Wisconsin, but also like Illinois, there have been, and especially in Pennsylvania, serious cases of shenanigans by the Democrats, let's say, when it comes to voting, and so hence turn out on the day to make sure your vote is counted. So for this theory of a blue wave to come out on the day, to boost the Biden and the Democrats' prosperity of the election, would require a massive buck in the historical trend of Republican voting patterns. So that you got that, but also there's and this is something I'll try and find. We'll talk about later on, but and I recommend another one to check out, which I've recently discovered, is called the I'll just get the name because I got the name wrong earlier, of these people, the People's Pundits. So the People's Pundits are a very, very I say interesting and also accurate. I think that they it's been led up by a chap called Richard Barris, I believe, and he's very critical. I mean, he is obviously on the Republican side, but he is very critical in some areas. He will say where Trump is doing really poorly in certain counties, and he will say where Biden's doing very poorly in other counties. So he is what I would say to be quite honest with his analysis of what's going on the ground, and he's very much in the same boat as the Democracy Institute, who we mentioned before, but also Rasmussen, and even, funny enough, Gallup, which are starting to show the shifts away from this, the double digits for Biden, and of course the People's Pundit, they are a polling organization themselves. And I'll just stop myself right here because Turnip Match has just turned up. We'll just add him. Hello there.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I've just been, I guess, introducing the show, what we're going to be going through, and I guess we're looking through the methodology of the polling, because I don't know if Turnip, if you've been following the various polling organizations that are being used by media outlets.
Yeah, they're all saying that Biden's somehow going to landslide the whole thing by a margin of like 10 points.
Yeah,
Insane.
yeah. And the problem with that, and what we're going to soon discover, is number one, the methodology is absolute batshit crazy. It's absolutely mental, and the problem is, and you'll see, there's an over reliance on phoning landline calls. There is, and also a very strange thing which I've noticed, which is an overuse of Survey Monkey, which is maybe it's their attempt to reach the 18-24 demographic. I don't know. And some just put in the we're also going to be looking at some of the other polling agencies where we've got like the People's Pundit and Barasiri. Someone just put in the chat there. He predicted Florida with a 0.2% in 2016. Yeah, and we'll look at his methodology. He's kept quite secret, but he's mentioned it, sort of how he does it. But from what I can see is that I think there is a multi-list of problems, and the biggest one that I can see with the methodology is, number one, they're actually doing it in a way where they're not getting to a larger percentage of the population, and the percentage that they're asking is usually the ones that be staying at home. The majority of women, will look at the actual figures in a sec, that it's like over 60%, so it's over 60% majority women, and it doesn't suggest, unlike other polls, how long they were engaged in the question of polling.
Yes, and this is just the simple like statistics problem with using models. But like one of the first things that you're supposed to know about models is that none of them are good. They have a lot of weaknesses and maybe one or two strengths. So just the first thing to know about any of this is it is most likely not going to be proportional, especially with a nation of 300 plus million people, with a geography that has about as much variety as you can find anywhere else on the Earth. It's going to be very difficult to just make a model in the first place to predict anything that nation is going to do, think, say, or believe, and much less to put it down between two options and somehow say that it is going to be able to predict beforehand that it's going to go in one direction and not the other. And I'm against polls as well that are saying that it's actually Trump going to landslide, but mainly against the people saying that Biden's going to landslide. And we can get into policy issue and all of that for why that's unlikely. It's just I wouldn't put faith in a model or an engine or a prediction or anything like that.
No, I mean, one thing I've noticed with the People's Pundit and Rasmussen, which is quite interesting, is instead of polling states, or even look at, because like national polling for the US in particular is pointless to do, because it's just absolutely meaningless.
Yeah.
Because it means nothing. And you don't even really get the. I mean, even if you wanted to find out what the popular vote would be, I mean, again, last time, I'm just trying to think. In 2016, I think, again, like Clinton, it was like sometimes like plus 17%. I mean, and when it came to national vote, and but one thing I've noticed with the political pundit and the People's Pundit and Rasmussen is they actually look at counties in those key battleground states, and when they poll, they actually poll those key counties to find out what's going on there. So it's actually a bit more concentrated. And one thing they do is that and this is the thing that they would admit where a lot of the other polling companies go wrong, is that they'll phone somebody up and they'll say, okay, how are you going to, okay, let's go through a list of questions. And the problem is, and I've done polling here in the UK, I did it for the EU referendum. And one thing you have to accept is people 9 times out of 10 will not want to talk to you and will not be honest with you, and that's just a fact of life.
Right, because these, to add on to my like diatribe earlier, these are also the results that you're getting. These are only the stated results. There's no way of verifying them. There's no way of checking them against each other. There's no way of knowing if they'll stay. That's another big one. Literally anything can happen between now and Tuesday that could change who knows how many votes. It's also very possible that one of the contenders could just keel over. Like,
Yeah.
it's quite honestly, polling's worthless, and perhaps you don't share that opinion, but that's one that I've come to hold certainly.
Yeah, polling is worth. I mean, yeah, because the problem is, and this is what I mean. Well, I mean, I think polling is what you would describe. I mean, I would actually, relate it to the what was it Einstein, definition or the madness, where definition of madness is when you repeat something over and over again, expecting the same result. One thing and this is what I would apply to the CNN polling, which we'll have a look in a second. It's just a pure definition of madness. They are all they're doing is they're just rehashing what they did in 2016, what they did in 2018 as well. I mean, when you think about the midterms in 2018, I remember, especially like on the Young Turds and everything, them absolutely pushing the idea of this gigantic blue wave. And while the Democrats did make gains, I mean, it wasn't exactly the blue wave, especially in the Rust Belt states. There wasn't actually that much of a and in Texas and everything, which oh god, the absolute cope from the Democrats at the moment over Texas is amazing. I mean, they genuinely believe, a good portion genuinely believe they're going to flip it, and it's going to be, they're actually even parting, and that they're going to flip Texas, which I think is going to, again, we looking at voter registration, but also just the postal, what do you call it, early mail voting or postal voting. Looking at the early sort of the combining of the two, it's just not playing out in reality. And yet the latest poll put out there today, no less, says that Biden is at 51% in Texas, and Trump's like at 43. So and this is the thing where both the registration, the party registration, and the early in-person voting, they both can't be right. One of them has to be wrong, and so this is why I'm doing this video in many ways, because nobody, and no journalists, especially here in the UK, and I haven't know about any journalists in the US, is talking about this. The only one that's talking about this at the moment that I've seen today has been Michael fucking Moore, who's basically saying, that lead in Wisconsin is not happening. Trump's going to win. He just pretty much just said it like, no, he's going to win. It's just.
Yes, and there are some people coping real hard, saying that the Democrats are going to win back like the state House and the Rust Belt in 2016. I don't think that's going to happen. What you saw in the debates and in town halls and speeches and all of that, for background first, these states, the Rust Belt, they are still, or at least they were, something could have changed in the past 2 years, dominated by unions, basically. Mining, manufacturing, all these other things, essentially from a bygone era. And the Democratic Party has had a grand plan in the form of the Green New Deal. And that is going to screw these people over so basically harder than the New Deal screwed over farmers. And anyone in the Rust Belt, the union leaders, the workers, and all this stuff that keeps up with this, I can guarantee you that they are smart enough to have noticed that, because they're obviously going to care about their job. They felt like they've been on the brink of losing it since Obama was in power. The Democratic Party has not disavowed it, and in fact, Joe Biden spent, at least in the first debate, quite a lot of time defending it as a viable policy option. Trump, on the other hand, has been not pandering, but playing specifically to them for the past 4 years. Um, you see places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. They're saying they're going to swing in all of this. There's a chance the Democrats can win it, and I just do not see it, especially after Joe Biden has failed to push back against his more radical wing of the party, where they basically just left this voting block out to dry. I don't see it happening. I see it as a massive cope.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, because the Democrats, I mean, with 2016, Hillary Clinton she didn't visit the Rust Belt at all,
No,
if I remember correctly. She
not
didn't
once.
visit because she was expecting that those states like Michigan, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and Ohio in particular would all vote Democrat, as they have done before. So there was a big level of assumption. Now, Biden's been going around the Rust Belt recently. He from what I understand, he's withdrawn campaigning from Texas. I think also I've heard that there's also been suggesting that he's actually pulled from Florida and North Carolina as well. But he's still holding out in Georgia, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an extreme, like, a similarity or something like that. He, unlike Clinton, has set foot in the Rust Belt and he has talked to them. But that's like saying that like the Communist Party has set foot in the South and talked to them. Biden has and his party have broadcasted this Green New Deal, clean energy, cutting down on carbon emissions and all of this for the past 8 years, and Biden has just gone in lockstep with them. That's going to stay in their minds, because if you work in the coal communities of Pennsylvania, if you work in the manufacturing of Michigan, and or any of these other things, if you're a part of any of those unions at all, automobile manufacturing is one of the more bygone ones, but still around, still a major voting block, and like the other voters that aren't necessarily a part of that block adhere to them. Much like, say, if you're not a farmer in like Kansas, you're probably going to vote along with them anyways, because like community is built upon. These people in the Rust Belt, those unionist people that adhere to them, I can guarantee you they remember what happened under Obama, where he shut down mines, factories. He basically cut down on everything that they were doing. And it doesn't help that Biden did all of this with Obama, however long ago. I can't remember exactly when in his term he went on this crusade for clean energy. But it really does not help that throughout this entire campaign, Biden has not walked that back. I do not see him winning these states again.
No.
And that's just my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's interesting is, and this is where I guess you could say the more Republican-leaning polls like Rasmussen and Democracy Institute and the People's Pundit have pointed out is that they are still giving Biden the lead in Wisconsin, and not because he is like above. I was just listening to them, not because he's above like 50% or anything. It's nothing to do with that. It's because there's like, I think it's like 20% are still undeclared. They're not like they're undecided. It's not telling you. And so they can't determine which way it's going to lean. And apparently, this is quite a common trend in Wisconsin, where they literally will not. There's a portion of the voters who will not say which way they're going to vote until literally the day before, and that's why, again, why polls back in 2016, similar thing happened. And I think before election day, it still gave Clinton like 10-point lead in Wisconsin. And of course, obviously that didn't take place, and so that was quite an interesting one, because I don't know why, in particular, that they why they remain. There's a good portion of the population up there remains so secretive about it when it comes to polling. Because because a lot of pollsters find it really difficult. Apparently, they just find it really difficult when they phone up and when they make contacts with that certain demographic, that they will not give them a clear answer until right
Right.
before.
Right.
So I don't know if it's like apparently it's quite a common phenomenon over presidential elections, in particular there. And then in New Hampshire, it's quite another interesting detail is apparently there's a very large habit in New Hampshire to straight up lie to pollsters about how they're going to vote.
Oh yeah. Well, that's an American pastime.
But in New Hampshire, it's on such a scale that it usually is to the detriment of the Democrats. Again, I mean, I think New Hampshire is one of the closest states from the last presidential election that given them what's it, another like was it 80,000 votes? It could have gone to Donald Trump.
Right.
And bearing in mind, they had like a 17. It was like a Hillary Clinton. It was like 17-point lead going in.
Right. So in New England, for like the past century or so, people just assume that it's going to be like the left wing area of the U.S. along with maybe the West Coast, depending on the time frame. New Hampshire, though, has been the home of quite a few projects. There's the Free State Project, and then there's quite a lot of other just groups that have located there that are at least not left wing explicitly. They won't vote for Clinton or whoever else. I do believe, if I remember correctly, New Hampshire out of the New England states is the farthest right leaning. Which would explain its tendencies to kind of just not really go one way or the other, because it's still a New England state. There are still left, but it's not nearly as bad as, say, Massachusetts or New York.
Yeah. And actually, just another point. I'm going to have to shame a previous guest who came on here the last week, and that's Night Cringewalker. I mean,
yeah,
he's
scandal.
I know he's voting for a Democrat, and his excuse was, okay, well, both were pro-abortion. So my message to you, mate, is, okay, fine, but if you find out your local police precinct has been turned into some fucking kumbaya hippie bloody glorified social workers office block, then you got yourself to blame. Quite frankly. I mean, he claims that he has voted for Donald Trump. So if that is true, then good on him. But I mean, he congressionally he voted for a Democrat. So just because of, well, at least I'll vote for honest progressives.
So
yeah.
I'm just saying yes, he did vote for Trump in the presidential race and all that under the conservative ticket, but when you get to the congressional and you look at the GOP versus the Democrats, I hate both of them. I perfectly understand the sentiment behind what he's saying. But if you take a step back, you can then notice that if you're not going to win based on like the personality that you're electing, then look at the party that you're electing. Because whips in United States politics, they're a lot less powerful than in Westminster politics, but still hold some power. Yeah, you can do some things, and if the whip is very talented, like say Lyndon B. Johnson was, you can usually know that you're voting for party line. I don't know the current state of the whips in Congress, but there is more hope that a Republican, regardless of how progressive they are, would vote against abortion than there is chance of a Democrat voting against abortion. So I don't really understand the strategic move that he made there, unless there's something that I've missed.
Well, I have a theory that he's actually just going to leave the state and he just wants to contribute to its further downfall. That's what I've come to. But
is he one of those people fleeing from the left-wing coastal areas to the interior and bringing his politics along with him?
I think he referenced it in the stream very briefly that he was going to move out from New York, though I don't know where. But I imagine, yeah, I think he's going to be one of those people. And to be honest, I mean, God, I don't know what's happening on election. I think there'll be a lot of people fleeing from the cities because I think it's going to go absolutely bloody mental. Not going to lie. I mean, I don't know about you, but do you think there's going to be a violence?
Oh my God, yes. I'm not the first one to make this point, especially not within our circles. That would, I don't know if he was the first technically, but the first I saw of it was Radlib.
Yeah.
But they mentioned something else, and I'd like to add on to it that we've already seen political violence this year, and it's much easier to do it a second time than it is to start it. And to add a historical perspective to that, um, throughout history, when you see an election, you see violence before it happens. On election night itself, you usually see quite a lot of riots. This happened not necessarily for an election, but it happened during integration in the United States South. What would happen is you would get civil rights protests, which are about as peaceful as the protests that we have today over civil rights. Very, very euphemistically named, all of that. And they obviously they would turn into a riot sometimes, though no history book would ever put it to you like that. But if you look at the property damage or the first-hand accounts there, you can see quite obviously they were riots. And then you look at the counter protests. They didn't stay peaceful either, but usually they weren't the first ones to fight. This was about past the time where they were actively out lynching people. So you would get two sides facing off against each other. These civil rights warriors versus these basically the status quo warriors or the traditionalists. It was a big group. Basically, everyone opposed to like the '60s wave of communism that swept the U.S. During a lot of the elections up until maybe let's say Reagan, you would get small scale violence that was essentially proportional to the violence that you got during the civil rights era. Jump to today. We have had sections of our own cities secede. We have had looting and burning, which I don't think they looted during the civil rights protests in the '60s. I do not believe that they actually burnt down buildings. I think they just bricked a few windows and all of that.
I want to say, sorry to interrupt. I
no, you're fine.
Say on that point, I think there was what was that film? Oh God, let me just think. There was a film that was released a couple of years ago. I think it was about one of the it was a Chicago riots, and it was basically like the coppers, and it was they.
Was it the DNC riots?
Oh, I don't think it was the DNC one. I think it was. I'm trying to think. It's got like that that ginger-haired actor, and he was like that cop who was like super super racist and like fucking double tapping blacks in the back of the head sort of thing. And it was based around that story where like it was like in this motel. And it's basically like this group of it was very loosely based on a true story where a group of police officers were basically holding him up and killed I think 3, and it was basically like the subsequent events that happened after that and everything.
All right.
And I remember that I think they sort of interchanged in the film like real footage, and I think there were like some some of the properties were the buildings. I don't think they were destroyed, but they might have been gutted out, and so they were on fire. And this was because they sent in the National Guard, and I'm just gonna search what film it was because it's that actually because this was the thing. It was sort of referenced a lot of the I guess you would say the fear at the time where they were saying, oh, there were Black Panther snipers on the rooftops and they were going to be trying to take out the police and the state police, the Illinois State Police and the troops, the National Guard and such.
Right.
I think it's called Chicago, actually.
So,
Yeah.
just in regards to those tactics, though, I don't think it would be a terrible move to mobilize the National Guards to keep order on election day.
No,
I don't think that would be a bad call at all.
no, I think that'd be the most sensible call because I think what's gonna happen. I mean, we know Antifa are planning something. There's going to be even if it's like small local scale, you know that Antifa's going to pull some shit on election day.
So,
Um,
I don't know how much you know about like U.S. like geography and politics and all that, but like I'm in Oklahoma, very
yeah.
red state, very conservative, very like rural. There were Antifa buses in my own town like a month ago. They have to be doing something if they are down here as well as everywhere else. Like,
Is it possible that they're because this is one thing I actually as an American here, I'll ask you this. Is it possible that Antifa is using a like a I guess you could say like a mobilized tactic where they will travel back and forth around the United States, making it look like there is a larger number than there really is, and it's just basically the same people who would be in Portland are then you're traveling down your way down towards Oklahoma, and then would go off to DC or wherever wherever the powers that be want them to go.
I think that that's possible, but I would say that it's probably just their leadership. Perhaps I don't think they would be taking the grunts down there with them because I can guarantee you every state has at least a willing number of rabid communists that would gladly don the black and just start hitting people over the head if they had someone organizing them to do it. So I think that's a partially correct observation, but I would just limit it to their leadership. I don't know that they're doing it to exaggerate numbers because they're not going to go after some gigantic army to overwhelm the U.S. They just need to cause chaos, and you don't need like insurmountable numbers to do that. You need enough, and I think they can get that at any major city in the U.S., whether it be Oklahoma City or Portland or New York City. But yes, it is certainly a possibility that their leadership is driving around because why else would they have Antifa buses?
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I mean, and the county in Oklahoma, the county that you live in, is it? I mean, is it quite a solid Republican
Yes,
county? Yeah.
conservative, yeah. Um, it like if you look in its electoral history, you're going to see a lot of Democrat and George Wallace votes, but that's because once upon a time the representatives coming from the Democratic Party in this area weren't left wing.
Yeah, yeah, that's always been. I mean, because I mean, if you look back as far as I guess you'd say the election in the 1860 election, you notice that the pro segregationists, the pro Confederacy and the pro KKK party was the Democrats, and some say they still are in when
Well,
it comes to segregation.
when kind of. So depending on where in the U.S. the Democratic Party was, the Southern Democrats. Okay, 1860 election had about four different major people running, give or take. Some might count a fifth or a sixth, depending on where you're at. But the Southern Democrats were plantation, usually like the plantation owners. The Northern Democrats were they weren't pro-slavery, but they weren't anti-slavery either. They were the Popular Sovereignty Party.
Yeah.
The newly formed Republican Party, Lincoln, they had a large. They were a coalition of basically the left forces in America. They had most of the urban North. They had the newly formed Marxists because this 1860 we have Marxism in America now. They had the former Whig Party and the radical liberals that came out of that, the radical Whigs, and they had this whole abolitionist group that came out of the North that were about as radical as the Shakers were to the UK.
Mhm.
Um, it's Like this is what the Republican Party was in that election. And then you had like a remnant of the Whigs from like the South and the Midwest. That they didn't call themselves the Whigs. It escapes me what they called them right now, but um, they
Was it the
basically
sorry? Was it the Constitutionalists? Let me just
Constitutional
find.
Union or something like that.
Yeah, that was it.
Um,
Constitution. Yeah, John Bell. Yeah.
yes, and he basically ran on a platform of don't don't devolve into civil war. So he didn't really have like an ideological position. So your options for 1860 US is a cabal of radical Whigs, Marxists, abolitionists, and basically insane Anabaptists leading a party, Southern Democrats or Northern Democrats. After the Civil War, I'm delving into a topic I'm sure you probably didn't want to stream about. After the Civil War, you get the Democratic Party remains. It doesn't go away. In fact, it stayed alive in the North, and once the southern states were readmitted into the Union after they got occupied, they kind of merged back together. They did have a paramilitary wing. Political parties will oftentimes have paramilitary wings. The Democratic Party was no exception. They had the red shirts. They were not the Klan. In fact, the Klan was never officially associated with the Democratic Party in its history. Hence, David Duke, if I remember correctly, he ran under the Republican ticket in Louisiana. And then in the 1920s, you had a lot of Klan members in the North. Well, I say the North, north of the Mason-Dixon line that ran under Republican. The Klan wasn't necessarily associated with one party or the other. There were segregationists in both parties. You had like the Dixiecrats and the Democratic Party, and then you had I'm not going to call them libertarians because I'm sure they wouldn't like to be associated with that, but you basically had quite a lot of anti-government forces in the Republican Party that didn't want the federal government to mandate one way or the other on segregation.
Mm.
That's kind of like the background behind all of that.
Right. Yeah, because I knew about the Dixiecrats and of course George Wallace
Yes, yes,
and it's one of the reasons why Nixon in
yes.
'68 because of course George Wallace with the did they call them was it the Dixiecrats he called them in that
He was the American Independent Party in 1968.
American Independent Party, right? Yeah, because he won well, of course he won Alabama and
Georgia and Mississippi, wasn't it?
yeah, that was it. Apart from that, I mean, and I think yeah, apart from that, Nixon won pretty much most of the North and the West Coast and California as well.
Yep. Yep.
Which was surprised me because I didn't know until quite recently that California used to
Was a red state. Yeah.
yeah.
So, if you wanted more American history, and I'll be brief with this, I promise. California was formed as a result of the Compromise of 1850, and this was when America was still balancing out how many free and slave states it had. So California was going to be a free state, and in exchange, the South got like a bunch of promises, and they got like a slavery return laws and all these other things. And basically the North conceded the Supreme Court to them. So California started off in the hands of the Whigs and then the Republicans. It was the state that gave us people like Patton, which wasn't a lefty, is putting it lightly. If I had to put it in any way, I'd say the ideology of California for most of its history has been sort of nationalist. Not necessarily Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, just they for a large part of our history were nationalist. And then you get the Hart-Celler Act, which allows before that you had immigration quotas, which stated only a certain number of people could enter the country from these specific regions. Hart-Celler got rid of that and said anyone can come in as long as it's legal. And then California has then turned blue and has not been able to be wrested back, and it never will.
No,
Just quite honestly.
yeah. I mean, we've had like well, probably not on the level, but similar in London, where once conservative constituencies are now solidly Labour because the left like to import voters. pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and create little fiefdoms, which will always churn out votes for them in national and local elections.
So here's something else for you that might be a bit of a shocker. The big thing in U.S. politics in the like 1900 to 1920 was progressivism. Were you pro-progressivism or anti-progressivism? The Northeast was anti-progressive for quite a lot of our history. New England, New York, they voted against against the Progressive Party and against the Democratic Party, which co-opted the progressives and the populists. And that's also flipped quite mysteriously, might I add.
Yeah, because this was another thing I was going to raise, and I apologize to everyone watching because they wanted to come here to see stats and figures and all that,
Right.
which we'll get onto shortly. But I was going to say, and another sort of side topic on that, when it comes to the actual Civil War, and I mean, I imagine probably some people in here have watched the film Gangs of New York. Which have you seen at all, Turnip?
I have not, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. So basically, one of the things, the underlying themes of Gangs of New York, that political of the time, is that the Civil War is very unpopular, and the draft and everything is massively unpopular. And in many ways, many people in New York actually are quite sympathetic with the South, to quite an extent, where you have Daniel Day-Lewis's character, who's like this pro-American, all-American gang leader, who's like an American nationalist, I guess you would say, who basically says down with Lincoln, down with the Republicans and everything, and he is I think even at one point, like in the parade, he just sort of jokingly says up the Confederacy and everything, just to tell the Republican candidate who's watching from up top, basically a massive FU. And so that was quite interesting, because one of the reasons for the draft riots, which were probably New York's most bloodthirsty civil disobedience, you could say, rioting, was it wasn't just the fact that there was the draft, it was the taxes, it was the war itself, it was Lincoln. And this is the thing we forget, is that the sympathies in the North for the South was quite, especially in someone like New York, was quite high. In fact, I mean, what was that organization in the North which was like a pro-Confederacy group? The ones that John Wilkes Booth was part of, that part of the assassination. Was it the KCK or something like that?
I'm afraid I don't remember the secret society. I thought you were about to start talking about the Copperheads.
Yeah. I can't remember. It was like a pro Confederacy group in the North. But yeah, I mean, that's just as a side note. One thing that, I mean, this is like, and this is the thing where you have like history is written by the victor, because we talked about the civil rights and everything. If the civil rights movement was a widely popular and the hippie culture and everything, it was like the popular trend of the masses. It was then Nixon's victory. I mean, this is the thing. Nixon, he got like 60% of the vote. And I mean, I love Nixon. I've been watching Nixon clips of him talking about Bohemian Grove recently, and I love when you talk about Bohemian Grove. He's like talking to his advisor, and he says, you say, trust me, you've never seen, it's the most faggy thing you've seen in your entire life. It's like, and no, but I absolutely love Nixon and his the secret tapes and everything, because he's really honest in everything that he puts out. But he I mean, he in many ways sort of accomplished the same level of political victory, you could say, as Reagan. But obviously I mean, I don't know about you, but I would definitely say Reagan was definitely a more charismatic and a better stage performer. Though I don't know if you would agree
Well,
with that.
oh well, yeah, well, of course, Reagan was an actor. Nixon was a
Yeah, yeah.
politician.
And so my point with the thing was, in many ways, while you had all this, the civil rights and the hippie stuff and everything, the reason why I think Nixon was so successful was because you had extreme circumstances in the country, and there was a good portion of the population who I wouldn't say were against the idea of every American citizen having equal rights, but what
Well,
they saw, what they saw on their TV of the riots, of the race riots, of the radicalism, like with the Black Panthers and all that sort of stuff, and then the Marxists and everything, it did alienate the vast majority of the population.
well, yes, of course. And something else you have to remember is this is before the media has had a chance to rewrite how the laws were, basically rewrite the narrative of what the laws were like in the South and what constituted equal rights. Before the Warren Court, equal rights, basically by every American except for the most rabid of leftists, meant if it's provided by the government, it's equal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be integrated. That was what equal rights meant. It's equal, but that doesn't mean that you both have to be in the same place to get it. And it was seen as a peacemaking measure because turns out if you put two different people together, it's more likely that they will fight than get along.
Mm.
And it was also for quite a lot of places, it was seen as a very popular measure as well. And you can attribute that to 100,000 different reasons, I'm sure. But if we also look at what the laws were, when they started protesting for equal rights as they had redefined it, basically meaning integration and equal housing and a whole slew of other welfare programs and political elevations for minorities. What were the current laws like? Well, they were protesting against these evil things called Jim Crow laws that were suppressing the minorities and making sure they couldn't vote. Well, what were these laws? There were poll taxes. Other nations and America at other points in history have had poll taxes, but it's not some evil minority infringing act. It's a poll tax. Here's my favorite one. They required literacy tests to make sure you could vote. This is to them, this is so egregious that you should ask a black person to prove his basic literacy before voting that it should not be in law ever again. I guess we just assume that they're all illiterate, so they can't vote unless we get rid of this law. But I mean, that's rather condescending, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes.
So, these are the evil laws they're protesting against. These are those evil Jim Crow laws. Now, some states did have a couple of extreme examples. Like you'll always be told about how like a couple of districts put their voting stations in really obscure places, but that was like 4 out of the entire South. And we're supposed to assume that the North and the West and the Midwest and the Rust Belt didn't do anything like this to any of their constituencies.
Well,
So,
yeah. This is the other thing. I think it was Ben Shapiro
right.
many years ago. He was talking about. He was, I guess, dispelling the myth of the historical racist South and then the perfect North. And he was, said, well, look at Michigan. If you look at Michigan, it is the one state which has the greatest self-segregation, the racial self-segregation compared to somewhere like Alabama, which is obviously seen as like the heart of Dixieland country and the KKK and white supremacists and all that sort of stuff. And as you said, this is the thing. I'm just trying to think. Obviously the famous one is the what's the Selma, that bridge? What was it
the march.
The march, whatever county that was in. That was probably one of the ones you referenced there that required who made it difficult for certain people. And this is the other thing. If you look into it further, especially with Selma, it wasn't actually just black people. While the majority were, there was
Mhm.
also a minority of very poor white people who lived out in the, I guess you say outside of town, in the sort of, um,
Suburb or
yeah,
rural
suburb,
areas.
yeah, the suburb low income area, and they were suppressed as well. And so, I mean, one thing, because I mean, I remember, you know, we sort of covered it. I mean, at school here in the UK, we sort of covered, like it wasn't, it was like we have like this ridiculous like Marxist thing called PSHE and crap like that. It's basically, just pure, Marxist indoctrination, class curriculum. But
Mhm.
what we would do is basically we covered like the civil rights and everything, and it, it, one thing I discovered in that was the fact that it wasn't just, as I said, it wasn't just black people. It was including low income white people, Catholics as
Mhm.
well, to a lesser extent. Um, and for me, I think it's sort of like a small townism as well, because, and this is one thing you find out is, and there was a town in, again, I'll go back to Alabama as a good example. There was a town, that was in a BBC documentary not so long ago. They were talking about the civil rights, and this town today has a black sheriff and black
Yep.
deputy,
Yep.
and it, demographically, the town hasn't really changed since the 1930s, 20s, and 30s. It's been, uh, mix. Obviously, one side of the town was more predominantly black, and then one side was white.
Mhm.
But one interesting thing was the town never had a problem with the Klan. It never had any lynchings. It never
Right.
had any racial um, racially violent incidents. It was just the town was segregated, and that was that, and people just went on their, normal days' lives. And one of the things was it took outsiders, to where a black man was well, he wasn't lynched. He was tied to the back of a truck, and he was basically dragged along the road outside of town. Um, and this, again, you would think, okay, that happened, in the 60s. Actually, it didn't. It happened, I believe, in the 90s. It happened a long time after. And so this is something that I think really needs to be taught, where, um, and dispelling the myth, of what the civil rights, the civil rights movement, what its accomplishments, because I think all it did, this, I mean, I would say at best, civil rights movement highlighted, I mean, local small town corruption, I guess you could argue.
Right. And going back to like the electoral perspective, what I was talking about earlier is you now know what the average American was thinking in the 50s. Like all these terms are being redefined. To be quite honest, everything wasn't too terrible, and they're starting to sound like a bunch of Marxists. Now you know why they would vote against Humphrey and vote with people like George Wallace or Richard Nixon. It's because these people weren't trying to oppress the blacks and the minorities. It was because they, like, quite literally everything was separate but equal, with a few instances of corruption. These people are
Yeah,
demanding equal housing, forced integration, busing in some instances, and all these other things. People don't want that. If people wanted to be integrated together, they would do it naturally, and they would not tend towards self-segregation. But that's not how the human nature works. So you get to the 1968 election, and Humphrey just completely flops. You get to the 1972 election, and McGovern completely flops. Um, Today, they probably wouldn't do so because these left wingers, these communists, these hippies, these college types have taken over the United States. But at the time, when things still had a semblance of normalcy, before everything was redefined, you can see why they would vote differently.
yeah. And so you've just sent me over it was the state of Louisiana, literacy test given to black voters in the 60s. Um,
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the evil Jim Crow laws that you have heard about. This is the terrible things that we must ban because of it's suppressing the black vote.
so Do what you are told to do in each statement, nothing more, nothing less. Be careful, as one wrong answer denotes failure on the test. You have 10 minutes to complete the test. So draw a line around the number of letters in this sentence. Draw a line under the last word in this line. Cross out the longest word in this line.
So
Okay.
you can
Yeah,
see
so
why it might sound a bit condescending to say that this is too high of a standard.
yeah, I mean, this is something that you would expect in well, yeah, this says say fifth grade. Yeah, you expect it in like early years schooling.
Yeah, yeah.
This sort of, um, I mean, actually just a question here? Louisiana, was this thought up under a Democrat state Democrat um, state government?
If I remember correctly, I think so. Yes, but there were also Republicans in power as well at the time that didn't get rid of it for some reason. Perhaps it's because it's more common sense than it is discriminatory.
Yes. Okay. To be fair, I'm actually dyslexic. So if I tell you what, if I was in the South in 1960s and being dyslexic, I'd probably fail.
No, no, you have 10 full minutes. That's quite a long time to do this.
I don't know. You don't know how bad my dyslexia is.
Okay, all right.
I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be one of the people being suppressed from voting.
Well, don't worry. Today you can claim that you would have been discriminated under Jim Crow and get your oppression points.
Oh god! I tell you what. If I ever move to the US, I'm just going to state. By the way, I've looked at the Louisiana state literacy test, and I would be a victim of Jim Crow. So, give me Gibbs.
Yeah, where's my reps?
Yeah, reps. Yeah, I mean, the trouble is, here in the UK, we have this absolute, a very one-sided view of Jim Crow, very
Oh yeah,
one-sided view of the South during this
yeah.
time period, and obviously, it's not really. I mean, it's not really consistent with much. I mean, for me, all this just screams as like this is like. I mean, all it does is actually exonerate the libertarian argument of and small government argument, where it says. I mean, to me, this just screams of bureaucratic, centralized crap that is coming out of a state level, and also, as I just said, local corruption. That's my takeaway from all of this. It's just it just seems like several instances of local county sort of corruption, and then state ridiculous levels of state bureaucracy.
Well, it's a system in which people vote, so it's going to end up in bureaucracy and corruption, and to begin with. Which I would say the more libertarian position there is to just not have a system in which you vote. but I think that's outside of the scope of this stream, and if pressed deep enough, probably my knowledge as well.
Yeah. So what we do is after an hour talking about just let's go into what we've come to talk about. So
sounds good.
We're okay. Well, yes. So this is the first one. Now this is from. We're going to talk about polling methodology. So we're going to go to a CNN gold standard. Got the top polling rated company that is gold standard and is the best for CNN. And of course, any criticism of this is just far right Russian propaganda conspiracy, and you just can't question it because you'll be a racist if you do. So we'll just go into it.
Funnily enough, all of those adjectives describe me. So,
isn't it? I mean, I tell you, Russia's a great get out of clause when you do fuck up with your polling. Just go, oh, no, I didn't fuck up. No, it's just Russians making me fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. I can keep my job.
Yes, it's the Russians who did it. Okay, so basically, here we go. Biden and Kamala Harris is winning. Yeah, you're going to have a massive blue wave. Sorry, Turnip. Oklahoma is going to go blue. Kentucky's, I mean, according to the BBC today, Kentucky could go blue. Utah could go blue. It's all going to go blue. It's going to be a massive landslide.
Wait. Kentucky and Utah. They're saying they can go blue.
Yes, especially Kentucky.
For context, Utah's
what,
state ran by like insane Mormons, and Kentucky it's essentially like bluegrass state number 2. You're not you're not number 1 and 2 essentially, but you're not going to you're not going to flip them blue unless you revert the Democratic Party back about 60 years or so.
So basically, if you put a segregationist in as the top of the Democrat Party,
then maybe, then you might have a chance.
It'd be interesting to see the Young Turks defend the segregationists. That would be interesting.
Oh, could you imagine?
well, whatever the outcome would be, you would definitely prove the horseshoe theory is accurate. Then Richard Spencer could become like a new co-host with like Cenk and such. That would be fun. So Kentucky and I just don't. The reason they're saying it is basically there's like within the margin of error, and they're saying like 8 points. I was like, well, that's not really within the margin of error, but okay, yes, fine, let's go ahead with it. That Biden's catching up in Kentucky, we'll just talk about Democrats like on social media. They've just been because they've been seeing these results. They're coming up with like that Texas and Georgia and Florida is all going to turn blue, which is okay, fair enough. And then you go into the more sort of extreme examples of cope where they say, oh, actually Tennessee might turn blue, and then Mississippi might turn blue, and it's like.
And if you keep going, Alaska's going to turn blue because they'd never vote for a Republican. They just elected a non-Republican senator. And then you look at the Midwest and you get Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. They're all going to flip blue because some reason. And then if you look at across the union, all 50 states will flip blue.
Yeah. All 50 states will flip blue. And I mean, but the trouble is, this is the polling they're seeing, and this is how they're coming to their. Because in many ways, when they see like what was the one that I think they were referencing was the one in October the 1st and 4th, where you got 57%. So they're sort of rounding it up to 60%. So they're thinking, oh, we're going to have a victory on the same scale as Nixon had in 72 when he got 60% of the votes.
Right.
So. All Republican states are going to pretty much go blue.
Right. Just so people know what kind of a scale that is, I believe there were 2 states that went blue in 72. It might just be 1.
Yeah, no, it was 2. DC and Michigan.
Yeah, so they're expecting proportions that literally every state except like what hasn't been said, Oklahoma and like what's another one that would stay red in this hellhole?
West Virginia.
Yeah, West Virginia and Oklahoma stay red. Everywhere else goes blue. Is essentially the numbers you're looking at here.
Yeah.
Completely likely, as we said before in the stream, models always work perfectly. And you always know what is going to happen with them. So, like, you might as well just not go out and vote.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I have my theory on that. The reason why they come to these ridiculous numbers that we're seeing in front of us now, and that we're seeing them talk amongst themselves in their own circles, is because it is to demoralize the voter that would go out and vote for Trump and vote for the Republicans as well when it comes to congressional races, senatorial races, and such. This is like it's basically, don't bother coming out and voting. Your vote's you're not going to win. It's not going to count. It's just accept it. Biden's going to become president, and we're all going to be we're going to go back to the 90s. It's going to be great. We're going to have a wonderful sort of post Cold War-esque boom, and everything's going to go back to normal. Russia's going to be the enemy again. Don't look at China, because China. We don't need to look at China. Russia is the
Yeah.
real threat. Yeah.
Don't look at who China funds either.
Yeah, don't look at the funds either. And whatever you do, do not look at the I hear certain lakes around Michigan where young Hunter has been visiting. I'll be careful. I don't want my stream to be removed, but yes, I've 4chan's been very active on where he's been going, and again, Anakin Cringeworth has been sending me like he sent me images of Hunter Biden's sex tape, and it looks like him and the House Biden and House Obama were consummating a union.
That's a very clean way of putting it. That's what I've heard. I'm not going to look at it. I will take your guys' word for it.
Well, Charles, I'm a racist, so I can't really tell the difference between. So I one would assume that it might be the same person. It might not be. Jokes aside, it's quite grainy, the image, so it could be anybody. It is Hunter Biden, but it could be the woman in question could be somebody else. So, but yeah, but so with this, okay. So enough of that. Enough of Hunter Biden. So yeah, I mean, look, you got the polling going back to April, and this is the thing they like to point, because this is consistency. So this is how they justify their polling: is, oh well, it's been consistent. You know, it has fluctuated a bit, and it's gone up a bit, and it's gone down a bit, but it's always been consistent. Biden's getting over 50%. So I mean, that just shows that the momentum behind which campaign has the most momentum is obviously with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And so let's just go past all this bollocks and let's just go down to page, what was it, page 20. Let's go back down to page 28, shall we? Let's see the forbidden page they don't want you to see, right at the bottom. Okay, so more on methodology, which they, again, if you go on their website, actually CNN website, and you ask for methodology, it says they can't provide it, but they do have to, I believe, legally provide methodology information on it. So there is a way to find it. You just have to download the bloody folder like this. So we've got here a total of 1,005 adults were interviewed by telephone nationwide by live interviewers calling both landline and cell phones. Okay, so Turnip, do you have anything to say on that first point there?
They are doing the typical like statistics graduate thing where like, 1,000 people, good sample size. We can predict 300 million people in the US's political opinions based on this. It might work in a lab or in finances or something like that, and where you use like actual statistical probability and standard deviations and margins of error and all of this. Because you can control variables in that. You can, if you are like finding out like a population of a bacteria or something like that, you look at a certain number of them to determine like some variable, you can control the variables and you can determine scientifically what is going to happen based off of this 1,000 that you've observed. In the United States, you cannot control the variables. In politics, you cannot control the variables. With people, very rarely can you control the variables. So interviewing 1,000 something people, not enough. I don't think you would have enough even if you interviewed 1 million, because there are so many variables that you are not accounting for that you don't know why they are predicting this, and you don't know how the rest of the state is going to go. It's when they interview these people and then they apply it to the rest of the nation or the state or the county or whatever, they are assuming that the conditions are the same or similar for everyone else, which is not true. At all.
Yeah. And I mean, when I've done a bit of polling, when it comes to like, because I mean, the stuff that I've worked in when it comes to like market research for like in TV and such, we were always told that 2,000 or 2,500 was a good number to go with. Making sure you have a good replica, a good representation across like demographics of your country. That's like a good number to go with. So
Right.
1005 seems just like it seems like a deliberate sort of picked number to, as we said, as you said, to get the result they wanted. And this is the thing: telephone. Who the
Yeah.
fuck uses landline? Seriously, what is this?
So
Oh my god.
that's another hilarious one because who who answers a pollster on their telephone?
Well, this is the thing. Okay, so stay-at-home mums and well, I imagine from what I
Yeah,
gather,
but
it's the large majority of those respondent are women,
mhm,
stay-at-home ones. You'll have a you I imagine pensioners as well.
mhm.
So you would have a large number of pensioners. Um,
Well, I just want to ask you this. Even if you are the stay-at-home mom that you might be like the demographic that's answering this, how many of them see the phone ringing and think, "Oh boy, the pollster, gotta answer." Like, you're getting a minority of a minority of a minority to answer this here. You can't account for their variables, and you're taking a tiny 1,000 of them and you're applying it to nationwide statistics.
do you want to know what
Um,
percentage that is when it comes like because this is the thing. People's Pundit have actually narrowed it down because they've been doing a massive critique of like Nate Silver. Okay, this is my rant about Nate Silver. If Nate Silver was a mystic in a circus, the circus would go out of business by now. He is the most bloody incompetent pollster on this planet, and he's a deliberate liar as well. I mean, he just flat out lies, and he knows he's full of shit. And the trouble is, he's too in deep with the Democrat and the left wing establishment that if he's honest with them, he knows he'd get yeeted.
right, of
Um,
course.
so yeah, and this the thing is it from what the political the People's Pundit has put out, which I don't have any reason to disagree with him. He hasn't shown his methodology, but he went through several scenarios of his experience, and I've had similar experiences where okay, you phone somebody up, you usually phone in probably about 5-6 o'clock when they're coming in from work. And this is the truth of the matter is, and you find this out very quickly, the majority of people want to get home, have a shower, have their dinner, watch
Yeah,
TV. They don't want to talk to you, and they definitely don't want to talk to you more than 10 minutes. Most of them barely don't want to talk to you beyond a minute. The amount of times I've had to talk to people when it does the polling, and usually the first thing is, hi, I'm here to do political polling. It's basically, fuck you, fuck off. That's basically what I get most of the time. Which I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all.
right.
And so and what you come down to is 3%. When it comes to this methodology, it's 3% of um, the sample who stay on long enough, who are interested. Let's say it's three
Uh huh.
percent. And so what you do is you further narrow it down. So that 3% now represents the was it 320 million or whatever
Okay.
the voting age is. I don't know what the voting age of America is, but yeah, it represents hundreds of millions of Americans.
Yeah.
Um, and so this is where the polls just become laughable because it's like, and this is the thing, it's only landlines and cell phones. And I mean, I don't know if you're on Twitter at all, but I've seen all these polls that have been put on Twitter of 40,000 people saying who you voted for, and a lot of them are saying Trump. And I would say if you got a poll sample of 40 or 45,000 people, which I've noticed seems to be like the sort of rough average of all of them, I would say that's more accurate than this, to be honest.
Oh well, of course. And here's something else you have to consider, right? Is it's in 2016 and in a small part 2018. Um, you had quite a large outcry from the Trump crowd, the right, the nationalists, the conservatives, whatever you want to call them, about polls. They quite rightly pointed out they can't be trusted. They're being manipulated, they're being used as a tool or a demoralizing force or something along those lines, depending on who you ask. why would you then turn around for the next election and play into it and answer it? Why would these people who saw what they were being used for 4 years ago and 2 years ago, and to an extent 6 years ago, feed into it now that they've identified them as a problem? How do we know that the people saying they're going to vote for Trump are people that were with him 4 years ago? How
Mm.
do we know that? How do we know that this is his base? How do we know that these are even people that? Okay, here, let me do it from a different angle. What about the other people that haven't answered? How do we know that they are for certain going to be um they are going to be consistent with your survey results? You don't.
No.
I would reckon that there is a large portion of the population that will not answer these polls or will not answer them honestly, probably more the former, because of what happened last election. Which is why,
Um.
so you get all these news outlets coming out saying, "Oh, lightning would need to strike twice for us to be wrong again in this manner. Look at the margin. Biden's up by 16 and all this other stuff." I would reckon they're probably going off of what they have, but I would also reckon that the right wing audience just is not answering. So, I mean, yeah, their models say it's correct, but it's probably not what's going to happen.
Yeah. And this is the other thing. Like, there. I mean, when it comes to the cities, the coastal cities, they don't know how far removed that they are from people.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
and so because I can imagine some pollster in New York or something who is being commissioned by CNN. They say, okay, well, we want you to do polling for Pennsylvania and Ohio. I can imagine in the first place, okay, Pennsylvania, okay, what? Yeah, Philadelphia. Let's do Philadelphia, and they just do polling around the suburbs there, and they'll say, okay, we've got white
Right.
people, we've got category white people, we've got this, and this, and then they'll do like the few outlying towns. But we've seen this year with Pennsylvania, a good portion of the, I think it's called like the oil counties or like
Yeah,
the
fracking and
oil,
all of that. Yeah,
oil counties.
refineries.
Yeah, they haven't been polled. They have not been polled. And they are still applying the exact same methodology that they have the same they're performing the same exact results that they did in 2016, and they haven't polled them. And so when you see like in Pennsylvania like plus 15 or whatever the hell it is now, it's like, well, yeah, if you poll Philly, I'm not surprised you come. Or what's the other one? Chester? Is it Chester?
I don't know the specific for Pennsylvania.
There's like there's two count. There's several counties that and this is the funny thing actually. Trump at the moment in when it comes to like early voting and voter registration, he's down slightly in the sort of more rural counties, but he's
Well,
doing
yeah.
very well in Philadelphia and in the suburbs and in the urban counties, which Clinton won. And the thing is, while he's down slightly, he can lose about 1%, maybe even two, because what he's gaining elsewhere will just make up for it. And this is the thing I think a lot of people in the media are missing, and this is something that has always happened. And if you look at previous polling, work with Mitt Romney and such, and probably as back as far as Reagan, you always see the black, let's say the quote unquote black vote, because the black vote depends on where you are state by state. The black vote has always sort of somewhat flirted. There's always been every election. It's always been with the Republicans. How can we get the black vote? How can we get the black vote? Even Trump at the last one went for the black vote slightly, but as pointed out by many pollsters, right before, usually in the last week, they see the black vote going behind the Democratic candidate because that's just
Oh,
how
of
it
course.
always turns out to be.
Right.
And by now, this is what you'd be seeing. But the problem is, we're not seeing that at the moment. Biden's getting 70% of the black vote, and that's disastrous. That's terrible. That's something that should be front page news in all the American newspapers and on CNN, and that's something Fox News should be pushing for, because that's terrible. 70%.
So yes, and
Terrible.
two things on that for comparison. The 2018 midterm election, black women specifically voted 98% Democrat, and most polling stations could not find a statistical significant portion of them to even say that 1% of them voted GOP. And then in the 2016 election, I believe it was 92% of blacks voted for Democrat. Now, 70%, it's weakening, obviously. However, that's still 70% of them going to the Democrats. I want to know, if you can win 30% of them, how many more of them will move over to the right? I doubt it's very much more.
I would say that, I mean, first of all, it was, I mean, when I saw initial sort of growth with the, because a lot of it is down to, I think there are three components to the black vote going to Trump. I think the first one was Candace Owens. I know that a lot in our circle go, "Oh, well, Candace Owens, she's a bit of a, a bit. I don't know how you would describe America, but maybe like a bit of a wet, or whatever."
Neocon, almost.
Yeah, neocon. Yeah, but she, the black exit, the Brexit, it did have traction. It did have a form of traction. It did. She went out to those communities, and she did her stuff. She had Kanye West right back along, if you remember, and she was with him like in, it was like what was it? It was the TMZ officers, and he just sort of ranted at the journalists saying slavery was a choice.
Right, and so I really wished that Kanye would have gone all out with his presidential run, because that would like sink the Democrats in a few vital places across the nation, just because of how many blacks it would split out of the and so in American politics, blacks vote tribally. Before FDR, give me a second.
Okay. Just give him
Sorry about that. Okay,
so
before FDR, they voted super majoritively to the Republican side.
Mm-hmm.
If some might say for obvious reasons, some might say for other reasons. There was still portions going to the Democratic Party and all of that. I talked about I didn't get to the political side of it, but I talked some about like the support for segregation among blacks on the economics chat with Radlib last Thursday. But super majoritively, they would go to the Republicans. Come FDR, come the New Deal, come Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society programs, they are now going to tribally vote for the Democrats. Very rarely do you see the black vote split like the white vote. It's not going to be 50-50 or 60-40 or 7. Very rarely does it even get to 70-30. Usually it's going to be 80-20, 90-10, or like we saw with the 2018 midterms, 98 to asterisk.
Yeah.
So 70-30, it is a big deal. And like just from a polling perspective, it's great and all. The more not pessimistic side, but the more slightly angry side of me would ask, though, at what cost did we get that? How much pandering and overlooking did we have to do to achieve that on the national level? But yes, it is significant, like you pointed out.
Well, this thing's first. I said there's three components. So first, you had Candace Owens and her movement, which has been going on since 2016. So there's been like 4 years of what she's been doing. I think also second component, which was quite important, I think was the rioting. And I think the post George Floyd and the rioting, and unless, I mean, I know that you got like all these ridiculous tankies and leftists on Twitter who are saying, "Oh, nobody died in the rioting and no property." It was like, actually, let's just look at the figures. I think it was, we don't know the full number, but I think it was like 30 people, or that was 35 people had died. A good portion of them were black. I mean, the one chap who
Oh yeah,
died in the Chaz was a young black guy. He was shot by armed communists.
right. So
And the father of him had received a phone call from Trump, and he went out on mainstream media and said, "But I got a phone call from President Trump. I didn't get it from any of the local Democrat mayors or governors or anyone like that. I got it from President Trump, and I really appreciate that." And so it's like and then from there you have um and then you had the social media wise, you had um, images of that former black police officer who was killed by rioters, and then you had those housing projects in Minneapolis, which was predominantly black, which was burnt down by white Antifa and white Black Lives Matter rioters. Um, and so there's when it comes to that, especially in those areas, and the fact that, because I mean, when it was being shared at this height on social media, there were millions of people watching it on, especially like Andy No and a few others who were sharing it. Millions of people watching it, and I just think to myself, especially amongst older black voters, that must have had an impact in some way. It must have, because the rioting was, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I know when it comes to like statistical on deaths and everything, the Los Angeles riot of '92 had a very high death count compared to what
yep.
you guys had this year, and I think destruction of property as well. But this time it was it just you saw elements, maybe not within the Republican Party, but especially within Trump. He was started to drip feed or start planting the seeds of getting sort of going after the black vote with the law and order, because we found out with polling that majority of African Americans want police. They don't want to abolish the police.
Right.
So I think a lot of it was, I think a lot of the shift is not so much what you on your side have had to concede to. I think a lot of it is just how crazy the left has gone over the last year in your country, because the Democrats have just gone completely off the cliff at this stage. I mean, especially what happened in Portland. I mean, that's like, especially, have you seen what happened like yesterday, where like they were announcing in Oregon like the coronavirus death, and it was like she was like
Yeah, dressed up as a clown.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, what the fuck's going on in Oregon? Like, what the hell is wrong with you guys over in Oregon?
I mean, just as a rule of thumb, Oregon is a hellhole. But if so, with the black vote and all of that, it's going to persuade people that were affected negatively by the looting and the riots and all of that. But it's not going to get to many people outside of that. But if the tribe is voting one direction, then the tribe is going to vote that direction. You'll have dissenters. The businessmen that got looted, the families of the people that got shot or maimed or murdered. But the majority of the people that were originally supportive of this has no reason to no longer support it, because they looted. They got money out of it. It's the evil racists that didn't benefit from it. It's perfectly viable to loot. It's a form of protest and all. You've heard all of it.
Yeah.
So they're going to stay a voting bloc, and it's going to keep going in that one direction unless something drastic happens. That's just how it works.
Yes. And then of course the last component, which is probably not because the second one was the core one, because that's what sort of I guess started off the process very publicly anyway. The third one, which I would say probably be what's probably shifted public opinion, especially amongst the black voters, away from the Democrat Party toward or away from Biden. Let's just say Biden for the moment, to Trump, was the I guess I would say surprising support from rappers. So you had your 50 Cent, which I He did endorse he's endorsed the Republicans before, so that wasn't exactly surprising when I saw it. Who was the other one? It was like, was it Lil? One of them, the other one that was like on
I
Instagram the other day. He just like,
I hate to tell you, I don't know these people that
no,
well.
I don't know. And I just saw like a clip of him saying, fuck Sleepy Joe Biden, Donald Trump 2020, and just posting like MAGA stuff and everything to all his followers. And then, and this is the one that's been a bit controversial, where they say, but he didn't endorse him, but in many ways he did, and you have to sort of read between the lines with this one, which was Ice Cube. And it's very clever what Trump has done, and probably what Ice Cube has done as well, where because Ice Cube has been setting up like this what is it, like a black uh black political movement, black activist organization, pressure group, or whatever you like to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to approach both the Democrats and the Republicans to talk about ways to go forward. And the Democrats said, yeah, that's all fine, but we'll do it after the election first. We'll just do it after the election first. And then the Republicans said, no, we'll talk about it now. And they, sat down and talked through it. And Ice Cube, obviously, he's released rap videos on like, fuck President Trump and all that sort of stuff. And he sat down and then he went on CNN to the disgust of Cuomo and said, well, I'm not endorsing, but all I'm saying is the Republicans wanted to talk to me about it, the Democrats didn't. And so that's like a nod wink wink.
Right.
It's like a further nod wink wink, because when I'm watching that, you're saying, I'm not endorsing Trump, but they wanted to sit down and talk to me, the Democrats didn't. And that's what he pretty much said. So it's interesting, because I would say those three individuals, obviously, I don't know where Kanye is at the moment. I don't know if he is like still full MAGA. He might be, I don't know. But those three individuals, I would say, must contribute to at least maybe a 5% shift, especially amongst, because we know that especially amongst the black vote, Trump's doing really well with black men.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Trump just does well with men in general in the voting categories. If you say were to hypothetically remove the 19th Amendment and hold an election, it would be at least Trump's Republican Party would win by a landslide, just in any election that they were given. And that's because
they would
the Democratic Party. Sorry, go on.
I say, would they win California?
I believe so, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've looked at that map specifically, and it was the 2018 and 2016 elections, but the Democratic Party has very much become the party of the woman.
Well, it did in 2016.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, 2016. And that was the other thing, because this is like, this is a bit anecdotal at this point, but my theory behind it, why I think there's going to be low Democrat turnout, was that in 2016, the hype behind Hillary was very much that this was like a historic moment, first female president. And I think a lot of people that I necessarily would want, because the campaign strategy was vote for her. And so I think a lot of it was down to a lot of her support, especially amongst the more enthusiastic voters, was because she was a woman. Not so much for policies or even for the party. It was just because it was a woman president. It was like as historic as, I remember when Obama in 2008, and in this country, it was the hype around the fact he was first black president, and so and of course he was coming off the back of a Republican two-term president, so it was pretty certain which way it was going to go.
Right.
And so I just wonder this time round, there's an assumption that you're going to have all those Hillary voters who wanted to vote for the first woman president are going to turn out and vote for Joe Biden. And I don't know they're that enthused like they were with Hillary, because they're not making history this time round. It's not like they are making history. It's not like they are. I remember in Philadelphia, Hillary Clinton had a massive rally a couple days before, a week before the election. You had Katy Perry there, you had Cher, you had every. I mean, it was like the president in waiting, Madam President.
Right.
And I'm not seeing it with Biden.
Well,
And
really unheard opinion here. Joe Biden's presidential run is very, very low energy. The man doesn't have the energy. I think that the DNC is afraid of overexerting him, because he might actually die if they made him do a massive rally like that, like Clinton was doing or like Trump is doing. Or he might do something. He might make an even worse gaffe, or he might do something just bad. Here, I don't think the DNC even wanted to nominate him in the first place. I don't think they expected him to win. I don't know who they were expecting to win, but I think that they just wanted to put Biden in there to give like the current people, like the people that were running at the time, legitimacy. Like, look, they are on the same level right now as Obama's last vice president. Like, they aren't all crazy. There's some good ones in there. And then he ended up winning because they were all crazy. But like, you see where I'm going with this. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't meant to win. They're stuck with him now. I think that they wanted Harris to be the VP of whoever did end up winning. So they just stuck with that plan. But in doing that, they just made things worse for themselves, because now they have Biden leading a party that's split down the middle between like Obama era neolibs and like rabid communists from the West Coast and the Northeast. Biden's going to appeal to one of those groups, and then you put Kamala Harris in for the rabid communists that essentially run the Democratic Party and promote it and all of that, or the anti-Trump Party, whatever you want to call it. Harris is a dirty, evil jailer who's essentially just a neoliberal in disguise, and for the more moderate section of the Democratic Party, Harris is a like crazy communist that's bent on instituting insane affirmative action and Green New Deal policies. So you have two candidates that are clashing, haven't really worked together all that well, absolutely went at each other for the Democratic debates. So like even in their like short political history with each other, wasn't really that amiable, wasn't really good. And now you're running this like 80-year-old like octogenarian to be president for 4 years. Everyone knows that he's going to abdicate and give it to Harris, but no one likes Harris. So like they screwed themselves.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, especially black voters. That she has a really low approval rating.
Of course.
Especially lower than Obama's, and that's and of course, that's one thing that Trump has been beating Biden around the head with is with the crime bill, and of course Kamala Harris, and the fact that she took joy in locking up black men for carrying relatively small amounts of like weed and such, and locking them up with exceptionally long sentences. Yeah. And this is the thing. I mean, I know that Trump says Biden called back in the 90s the black people super predators. I think that was Clinton. I don't know if Biden did actually call them super predators.
I mean, even if he didn't, Biden got the start of his career by working with Dixiecrats. Like that's not that's undeniable.
That's been true. I mean, he sat on committees in like personal restaurants and personal life with at least two members of the Klan, Though
Right.
I do hear from a certain Democrat who follows me on Twitter, who likes to remind me, no, in the 90s he was no longer part of the Klan. He left like a few years early. It's like, okay, fair enough. Oh, okay, yeah, he's reformed. But the thing is, he said literally, in the early 2000s, he said, "Oh, yeah, well, you're what's his name? Bird? Is that it?
Yeah. Yes. Harry F. Bird.
Yeah, that's it. He said in like an interview with Fox, he said, "Oh, yeah, well, about segregation." He said, "Well, of course, I changed my mind because things change, and we've got a lot of white N words now." And he said white N words like 4 times in the interview. Um,
Right.
and then he said after the interview, I think because he was a bit old and geriatric at this time he was in the interview, he sort of
Yes.
realized what he said, and he just said, by the way, when I use that phrase, I understand it may be offensive, but I mean it in a in a way where I'm saying that people just want integration." So so even at that age, even when he left the Klan and everything, he still saw people um, who were I guess say wanting to integrate the core Democratic Party values as white N words. So
Well, yeah, of course.
yeah,
Um,
so he was never reformed. But as you say, I think and of course um, Biden gave a eulogy at his funeral.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he was a mentor and a great friend and everything. So
I'm just gonna put it
um,
this way: if it was possible, if they had run young Biden, he would be a better right-wing conservative candidate than Trump is. Like, this
yeah,
is the person that like the left-wing party is running. And that doesn't show that like how far things have fallen or anything like that. That more just shows like how oily and snake-like these people are. To preserve their own careers, they will change their ideology, views, and efforts that much over the course of a lifetime. It's not because they
yeah,
believe in anything, they hold any serious convictions. It's it's because they want to keep their career.
yeah, and of course, Biden. Now, this is the thing going around Twitter at the moment of Biden in a Senate meeting, and he's saying, we don't want any more,
Oh,
N-word
big
mayors and
shots. Yeah.
and senators and such. And basically, I know that some Republicans have been taking that clip and editing it and saying, Biden 2020, and and there's been like a lot of jokes about it. Now, I mean, to be fair, that was he was quoting somebody else who he was critiquing. Um, but yeah, I mean, you see the mentality, and I'm surprised Biden hasn't come out and said the N word, like on TV or radio or anything like that at this stage. I imagine he's going to do it between now and then.
Um, right. It's right. There's not really much more to add, I don't think.
No, so I mean, yeah, he's going to be saying that sort of stuff. Um, but I was just going back to this quickly. So one of the other things which again took my interest, among the entire sample, 33% describe themselves as Democrats, 28% describe themselves as Republicans, and 39% describe themselves as independents or members of another party.
Okay,
Um,
so before we go any further, from an American context, if someone calls themselves an independent, not a libertarian or a green or a communist or a neo-Nazi or Christian identitarian, whatever, if they call themselves an independent, that usually means that they're a socialist that got disillusioned with the Democratic Party because they saw it as being too far to the right. Independent in the US political sphere, technically, yes, it means unregistered voter, but it just means they're to the left of whatever party that they just left.
right.
Sorry, continue.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that. So, so what's okay? The lowdown of party affiliation. Let's just say, um, are there more registered? Well, actually, we'll get onto that in a minute. But historically, are there more registered Democrats than registered Republicans?
Historically, no.
No.
Um,
Okay.
historically, and that's for the past 100 years, and that sort of historical time frame. It's because the Republicans have always controlled, until very recently, much larger populated states. If you go back, say, 20 years, it starts evening out because then the Democrats take control of the cities, but the Republicans keep the suburbs and the rural areas. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, then you might say, well, then why aren't all the elections 50-50? And the answer to that is because the Democrats are always going to vote Democrat because they always go left. But there are some Republicans that don't always want to go right, so they will flip to the Democratic option, like say with Romney or the Never Trumpers, or people like that.
Kasich.
So, yeah, Kasich. So it's evened out. To basically, yes, there is a margin. I think there is technically more registered Democrats now, but that means very little. It's and even then, in some states, you don't. That doesn't even that being a registered member of the party isn't a. It depending on how the political conventions are designed in your state, it's not even usually a prerequisite to vote for who your representative for that party is going to be.
No, and this is the problem because these polls, and I mean this, I mean, we'll have a look on the next one, but because they use SurveyMonkey, which is just beyond ridiculous at this stage. So, well, anyway, with this one, one thing I noticed, and this is something that was pointed out to me, was that North Carolina, which has obviously been quite obviously part of the swing state and one that Biden, we're told that Biden is leading and is going to flip.
Right.
And they use the example of voter registration plus polling equals Biden getting 10%, 10%, flipping from Trump and everything. But one thing I noticed with North Carolina is that it has an unusually high registered Democrat, older white population. And that's something that was talked about by, I guess you would say, the polling, like Rasmussen and the People's Pundit, who
Right.
who wanted to investigate that further because that was something which was quite interesting because it's unusually higher than anywhere else, and they sort of come to the conclusion that they, given their age, because you're looking at like 70 plus, right? It
Right.
looked like that was at a time when, as you said, the Democrat Party used to be quite conservative, especially the Democrats in the South.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and that was the same
Um.
in North Carolina, and it looks like that effectively there is a portion who are still registered Democrats, but they just vote Republican now. And that's why
Right.
you have a ridiculous over polling of Democrats, and every election, whether it's presidential, congressional, or senatorial, or governorship, whatever it is, there is over polling in North Carolina for Democrats. And that's one of the identified reasons behind that, because, of course, as we know, older people are more likely to turn out and vote than younger people,
Mm-hmm.
especially older white people. And so in the United States, so that was something that I found very interesting, and this is why you're seeing with North Carolina these again higher um, gains for Biden. And that was just something that just interested me because it is a legacy of the old Southern Democrats, and these are things the polling companies aren't picking up, and all it does is require a little bit of digging, and then when you phone up these people, you need to ask them, how did you vote 40 or 50 years ago, or what was your family voting pattern? Because this is something that this is what the other pollsters did, and that's how they found it, because they were pretty much confused with why that was the case, and they found that about in 2016.
Right. And something else that really obscure. This is why going off of party registration and party voting is a terrible idea. Um, polling to be a bit more accurate, should go based off of issues or ideology or like political thoughts instead. Like, would you describe yourself as conservative, liberal, moderate, whatever? And then go based off from that, and then start predicting results. Because if you just go off from, well, are these people voting Democrat or Republican? That tells you very little about what they're going to do in a presidential race where there are two options. You know,
Yeah.
it especially in the U.S. I would assume that in the United Kingdom, party registration means a little bit more,
We don't
but
have
in
this is the thing. I just want
or
to
membership rather. Sorry.
yeah. Now this is the thing with the UK. It's slightly different because the vast majority of the population aren't members of any political party. I mean, the
Right.
largest political party is Labour Party, and they've got 500,000 members. And UK's population is 65 million, so it just gives you a
Okay.
clue of that. The Conservative Party, which is what I'm a member of, it's about 170, 160 odd thousand. And then the Lib Dems is like nowhere because they're a bunch of cucks and they've just gone off the edge of Marxism. So
Right.
they're that's where they are. So the vast majority, and yeah, in the UK, I have to pay monthly. So if I want, so one, the assumption is that if you're a member of a political party, that you're going to vote for that political party. Number one, because you're local, you pay the membership monthly. You're involved with the activist group, and the thing is, like, if I just got really pissed off with the party, I just leave. I just cancel my membership. That's it. I'm no longer a registered member of any political party, and that's what most of them do. We don't have registration in the US context here, but that's why they don't do polling of in UK elections of membership, because I mean it will just show Conservatives, what do you think of the Conservative Party? Are you going to vote for them? It'd be like 100% yes, and that's what it would be. Same for Labour and such. So
Right.
yeah.
So
We,
and it's not much better in the US as well. Like that should be obvious. It's
yeah,
like if I'm registered Democrat, that means very little. Am I a registered Democrat since 1950? Because if so, not going to be voting Democrat this next election. Am I a registered Democrat since 1990? Even then, it's a 50-50. Because why did you register Democrat in 1990? Like you see, there, you're modeling voting on politics with variables that you don't even know, variables you can't control, variables that you can't measure. It's you're applying scientific models to a subject that isn't science.
exactly. It's not. It's just. I mean, in many ways, it's pure anecdotal, and also it's self-fulfilling as well, the polling, because if you're going to poll, like in this one, if you're going to poll, let's just say, as you said, like 33% registered Democrats, or describe themselves as Democrats, and then and 39 describe themselves as independents or members of another party, then of course you're going to get 50 what is it, like 51%, 57% Democrats, Biden, support. That's what you're going to get, because you're asking those people. Now, if you turned it around, I bet if you turned the poll around and you had, say, 33% Republican, 28% independents, and then or if you reverse Republican and Democrats on this one around, you would probably have Republicans on 54%, and then you'd have Democrats on 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So all you're doing is you would just be playing the sample that you got around. It doesn't actually tell you anything else that is important. And this is, remember, this is the gold standard, everyone. This is the gold standard of polling, and this is what they've come up with. And to make it even worse, I am told that in this poll they also asked non-US citizens.
Holy Lord, are you kidding me?
I am not kidding you. That's what I have been told. I have been told that um, I have been told that that CNN they've been polling non-US citizens as well. I'm also told that NBC have also done the same. So from where I'm standing, this poll is completely bollocks. It's just forget it. It's absolutely useless. It tells us nothing. It doesn't even say where they actually asked the people. I mean, they could have put down like states. I mean, they could have all been polled in California or New York. But this is what all the pundits, all the commentators, all the journalists, this is what they're all saying, as gospel truth. Either they're lying or they're just really stupid. I can't figure out which.
Well, perhaps maybe it's just the polling is unreliable.
Yeah, possibly. And so while we're on the topic of voter registration, this will be the next one that we'll go to, and this is what we got here. This is early voting. Sorry, this is early voting. So this is mail. So I just brought up New Hampshire. Now this is the thing. I have a bit of an unpopular opinion in our circles. I think Trump is going to win. I think he's probably going to win the same as he won in 2016. But I think there's going to be two surprises coming his way this time. I think he's going to win Nevada, and I think he's going to win New Hampshire.
I mean, it's possible. I'm not in a position. I think we've established in the stream that no one's in a position to say for certain how it's going to go. But
no,
I can certainly see that happening. Certainly much more likely than, say, New York flipping red. There were people going around saying that, and that seems like the Republican cope. But Nevada and New Hampshire, I can see happening.
Yes. I mean, I know. I said as a joke several months ago that New York's going to flip red, and California's going to flip red, and everything as a joke. But and some people took it a bit too seriously, and then it was like, fucking cope and everything. But
right.
Yeah, I think New Hampshire could. I think New Hampshire is probably more likely than Nevada. Just on the raw numbers from last time. If you go along the idea that those who voted Trump last time are still going to vote Trump this time, because I can't see. Again, this is from the polling, also anecdotal. There is no evidence to suggest that Trump voters at large there's any significant percentage that are going to Biden. It's just not shown there. And Biden campaign have already admitted that, and they know that. That's why they are hoping and banking on higher turnout.
Right, and I really want to know, what demographic did Trump win in 2016 that he just doesn't appeal to for 2020, or that Joe Biden appeals to more? I don't understand which demographic that would even be.
I don't understand either, and that's something I think that's why you're seeing. I've been seeing actually over the last couple of weeks of, we're going to win Texas, we're going to win this. It's going to be great. We've got all these white people voting for us. It's going to be a wonderful coalition, and the Republicans are going to be BTFO'd across the board, and it's going to be glorious. And now you're starting to see, actually, no, it's down to the Rust Belts. Actually, no, Florida's going to go to Trump. It's looking pretty good for Trump. Actually, no, it's looking like that Pennsylvania is going to be the last sort of hope. And now today, as we said, we got Michael Moore saying, no, Trump's going to win. It's over.
Right.
So yeah, so that's where we are at the moment. And I just want to have a look at. We'll just look at the early voting. So I just want to have a look at New Hampshire for a second. So mail-in ballots requested. So what we got is this is on party registration, and you got like the increase here from 2016 to 2020. Now there is an increase, and it's quite a substantial increase. But I think it's like that across all the states. There is an increase when it comes to mail-in ballots.
Well, yeah, it's made an issue. People know it exists now.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the reason behind that, I think there's multiple reasons. I think, I imagine COVID could be one, possibly. I don't know. I don't know why the reason behind the increase.
I mean, there's an infinite number of variables, aren't there? It could just
Yeah,
be that
there's different variables.
some people have looked at the weather for that day and don't want to go and vote in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say I do love the Democrats' reasoning of voter suppression in Georgia, where basically, when it comes to early voting, the reason why basically their definition of voter suppression is if you're a black family and you're driving in a car down to your local polling station and you see a long queue, that's a form of voter suppression.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we've already established that basic literacy checking is voter suppression. Why wouldn't long lines be as well?
Yeah.
I mean, just look at these evil racists suppressing the black vote by, I guess causing lines to form. Ooh,
I know.
wow.
Oh, so retarded. And I mean, so so this is what we got here, and um, the reason why I say New Hampshire got interesting is the Dems here are at 49%. So we've got an increase. Now, according to the polling that we see by your boys in CNN and such, we would be expecting, when it comes to this level of increase with the current polling that is being predicted by the mainstream media, that Biden campaign should be well over 50%. It actually should be in the roughly 60% for New Hampshire, maybe even 70%, given what's been predicted. But at this time, the party registration is sitting at 49%. And I think that's quite a telling information. That's quite interesting, to say the least. Republican as well is at 22%. That is actually slightly up than what they had in 2016. And then, of course, you got the others, which I imagine is independents and people who were members of the party and just left, or whoever.
Right.
Yeah, so whoever. And we've already established that in New Hampshire, they have a very particular habit in that state of lying to pollsters and lying to all sorts of pollsters, no matter how many conversations they have, of how they're going to vote in by a certain percentage. I think it was at 20% or so. They seem to have a habit of lying to those pollsters on that. And as we said, now voter registration, what percentage would you estimate as a rough guess? Let's say 49%. What percentage do you think from that Democrats are going to be Trump's Democrats?
To be honest, with it since it's New Hampshire, probably I would say probably about 10 or 15%, maybe. But
Yeah.
I don't have anything to go off from. That's just like a feeling.
Yeah. And that's where it comes down to, because at this moment in time, the problem with someone like New Hampshire is because it's the fact of the matter is that they do not they're just not honest about how they're going to vote to pollsters. And this is the one state where they do lie when they're being asked. And this is the thing, because if I was a Democrat strategist and I was looking at this 49%, I'd be thinking quite worried, because And we'll just go. I'll just go to another state here. That would probably. Well, let's go to uh, which state shall we go to by state? We'll go to Florida because that's always that's the one where
Yeah, this is the fun state.
Yeah, this is the state where there's meant to be. This is where the whoever wins this state wins the presidency, especially when it comes to GOP. If a Republican wants to win the presidency, by and large they have to win Florida. And so what we got here again, mail-in ballot request, and this, the increase 75%. So it's not as dramatic as New Hampshire's one, but still substantial. Same again. There's a slight increase in mail in and early in-person ballot returns.
Right.
Again, party registration here, 45%. And the Democrats were expected, because I mean, again, I'm really into this. Democrats historically do well in mail-in ballots, and early voting. They do extremely well. In fact, we were told earlier on that they should be when it comes to Florida, they should be in the 60% range.
Right. Yeah. It's this is going off from voter registration, which very little to do. We've already established at the polls earlier not to be trusted. And personally, I don't see any demographic that voted for Trump leaving him. And in fact, I see a lot of Democratic people not going to vote Biden, at the very least, because he is senile.
Yeah.
So
but I probably didn't explain this well enough. But my point is to this, because I know that you don't trust the polls, but Target Smart it was created by the Democrats. Target Smart. This is a Democrat-run thing. By their own admission, and this is the thing. Let's just say that they're polling, because the idea is this is what they have done here is basically they've just been doing the raw numbers. They've been looking at the raw numbers and everything, and they've just been looking at state to state, county level. And this is the thing, they are contradicting themselves consistently from the previous polling to this. And so and this is where you have the thing where you've got one polling which has got Biden in Florida like just over 50% or 50-50 neck and neck. And then on the other polling here, when it comes to prior registration and county polling, it's just not playing out. And this is the really interesting thing, because they, even by their own rules, it's just not adding up.
Right.
And so I don't know what they're playing at. That's where I just don't know where it's coming from.
I don't know what they're playing at either, to be honest. It's to be quite honest, this is what I would call a mess, because there's obviously no 10-point lead, and people are not going to vote by party line. You're not going to get 60% of every state to vote Democrat because that's what they're registered. You're not going to get them to vote based off of whatever you predict this issue is going to be popular with this demographic, because if that was the case, then you would be polling places like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Texas to be dark red, because they care about environmental policy in a way completely inverted to how the Democrats care about it. So they wouldn't go along with that because their jobs are on the line. But that's not what the polls predict. You see what I'm saying? There are so many uncontrolled variables in polling, which, or at least in political polling like this, and the method that's being done here, that everything is unpredictable. You can only go off from what you've observed, from what other people have observed, and from, I guess, trends from the last election, now that we knew how they voted then. There's not much more you can go off from, is there?
There isn't. I guess I would say the only polling company that I would look at this moment in time would be the ones who are polling counties, like very particular counties.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I look at the Republican pollsters who are looking at counties in the swing states, which Hillary Clinton did very well in at the moment. Look at those ones. I don't. I would say look at Democrats pollsters, which are looking at Republican counties, but they're not doing that. They're looking at a state and national level. Um,
Right.
P-Man just put in the chat here. Look at Trafalgar. Now, Trafalgar. To be fair to Trafalgar group, they were the one. I think they were near enough the only ones to come close to predict 2016. I think them and the People's Pundit, they were um, I think they were off like by 0.2%, so very accurate. And they predicted a Trump victory along with a few other outside pollsters. The ones on the establishment outside who were mocked relentlessly before the election.
Right.
And Trafalgar, they were really badly critiqued back in 2016. And the Democracy Institute had the same given them recently when Trump tweeted out one of their polls that was in the UK Daily Mail, and then like the usual Democrats on Twitter came out and said, "Oh, who are these? These Democracy Institute? They're a bunch of right wing Republicans and conspiracy theorists, and and the trouble is, like Nate Silver, joined in with the public shaming, but at not one point did they actually contact them to just ask them like their methodology or
Uh huh.
anything. It was just um, they and the thing is, into with the methodology, that I don't believe they used actual landline or cell phones or anything like that. I think they used what they're very secretive, but I think a lot of it was in person, which is not obviously time effective. But again, they used it on a county via county line to see, like you got the swing states, but you have the swing counties, and there are certain counties which
Oh,
you
right.
need to
Yeah.
look at. Yeah, there are certain counties you need to look at. I think in Florida you got Miami Dayton, which is one that a lot of them have been looking at lately, which was won by Clinton, but it's doing uh, very well. And there's two reasons for that. It's number one, it's the Cuban vote. Um,
Right. Yeah.
they're coming out, but also there's something that the mainstream media haven't picked up on. There's a lot of new American citizens who have come from Venezuela.
Right. Yes, and they're going. One would assume that they would not vote for open communism.
No, in fact, it is higher than the Cuban. In fact,
Ah.
very high amongst men and women. And so I think when it comes to Florida, they've. I mean, I don't know what the actual Cuban number is. I think it's like 2,000. But if you got 2,000 living in, say, the like Miami Dayton, that will have an impact or some sort of impact, at least if it's a close race. Um,
Right.
so there have been, I think there's been great overlook there. Um, so
Right.
yeah,
And
that
I think it's been known on the cigar stream from my perspective. The problem I have with the not importing these voting blocks, but relying on them for anything longer than a generation or two. Um, Quite often the complaint is that this anti-communism is something that's going to be relegated to that first generation that comes over here, because the
yeah,
second and third are not going to care. The second are going to get stories from their parents about how terrible it was, and they that might stay with them. But by the time you get to the third generation, what grandma and grandpa are telling you about communism is not going to be felt in you in the same way that it is for them telling the story. You're going to be like, "Oh, here goes grandpa." Not that I would say this or that anyone on our circles would say this, but like the average person's going to go, here goes grandpa again about communism when we shut up. And they're
Yeah,
going to vote based on who gives gives. But yes, for this election, looks promising.
yeah. It just I mean, like, even if we take the early voter the voter registration and county polling, and all that, and early, mail and ballot voting and everything that have been counted, it doesn't it doesn't correlate with what's been putting out there with the tens and the 17-point Democrat lead in these
Oh, no.
certain states. It just isn't correlating. Um, and the fact that I mean, I could forgive. Let's just say it was like a three. They were like 3% out. That there was like
Yeah.
a margin of error of 3%. I of 4%. I could probably go, yeah, okay, fair enough. Maybe they, maybe you got 3% margin of error, but they're close. No, they're just drastically out. And I mean, and this is the thing where, and this is where I've heard rumors about this, that in fact there are some pollsters who have actually been sacked or blacklisted from a certain media outlet in America, which, from what I hear from Trump supporters, suck. And they are blacklisted when they produce polling results which show that Trump has a lead of, say, 2 to 3% in
Right.
some places. So there is an incentive there to massage figures, so to speak.
Right, of course. Well, it's there always is, because these pollsters and the people reporting on them, they have their own uh, they basically have their own goals with them, and we know what they are. We've hashed this out before. There is no incentive to honestly report what the actual numbers are.
No,
Not one. Anyone that is going to spend the time, money, and effort to report on these, they're not give in, but they are going to start seeing its potential to be used more as a weapon or an agent than they will as like actual statistics. Here's how it's likely to go. What if I'm going to set up a media company? What incentive do I have for honest reporting? Can you think of one?
well, no, because the and this is where you have the problem of echo chambers, because it just creates echo chambers. And to be fair, I mean, it can happen on the Republican side. Maybe. I mean, I have thought to myself, maybe, myself and many in our circle and such are wrong. Maybe Biden will win. Maybe Biden will win, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But and because we are in all echo chambers, but I think the Democrats and Biden support, and the Biden. Well, I say Biden supporters. I can't find many Biden supporters, but Biden voters who are deep within the Democrat Party in the far left. I think they are in a bigger and deeper echo chamber than we are.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, to be quite honest, the only way that I can see Biden winning this next election is if they purposely miscount the votes.
Yeah,
They're
I think the two cities you're going to have to watch for would be Philly and was it is it Chicago?
probably.
I know Philadelphia is like one of the most corrupt when it comes to
Oh yeah,
allegedly
yeah.
anyway.
If we're
Yeah,
talking corruption, then yeah, Chicago.
yeah. Um, and I think and this is the thing, where it's I know it's been said like on Cigar. I think Binary Surfer always says it like the left projects. So the left are projecting at the moment that if the only way that and Nate Silver's been saying this, the only way that Trump can win now if he steals the election. He
Right.
steals the election,
Yeah.
and it's like, but that's what you guys are doing. Um, and that's what they will do. And we know they do this because thanks to Project Veritas and that the sort of, and what O'Keefe's been doing, we know that these ballot harvesting things are real. We know what the scope and scale of these things are now, um, and to his credit, I mean, yeah, I mean, I know that people say he's uncovered a Republican one, I think in Texas, who's been doing voter fraud as well. It's like, fine, yeah, both sides are doing it, but I mean, We know
One's doing
which.
it a bit more than the other one, and one of them has a lot more power behind the scenes than the other one
Yeah,
does, I would wager.
I would wager too, and I'd also wager this. I reckon that in the last presidential election, I think Trump did win the popular vote.
Ah, really?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. I mean, I haven't I haven't heard someone claim that yet, but if you think there was some finagling going on with the vote counting.
I think in California there was. I think if you look actually at the what I think in California there was. I think at the last presidential election, it was showing he had a clear lead in the popular vote until California came in when it flipped there. There has been, again, accusations of which I cannot prove, unless Project Veritas can prove it for me.
Right.
Out there that there were, ballot harvesting, and I don't know what we call in this country proxy voting, where you vote, where someone gives you vote on someone else's behalf.
Right. Yeah, I can certainly like there's 101 ways in which we can list how people can commit voting fraud in the US, but I haven't heard someone claim that the popular vote was stolen. And I may have to look into that now because
That was again. That's what I've heard on the again channels like the Political Pundit and everything. That
right.
was what they believed could happen, especially in California. And I mean, I had to look into it. There, I mean, as you said, there's a million ways. You got the usual mail-in. You got the whole signature thing. You got the proxy voting. You've got what else did you have? Yeah, you had the fact that ballots being sent to non-American citizens,
Hmm.
which obviously in California, I mean, what's
Yeah,
the
I wonder how many non-Americans are in California. How many
yeah,
millions?
how many is exactly? Um, and I don't know if you have it as well. Do you have because this was something that I was wondering as well in some states. Do you have a double voting problem? So let's say you got a residency, let's say in California, but then you got a residency in um, a neighboring state, so like Nevada, let's say, as an example.
Uh-huh.
Because in the UK, there's been problems where you had people in several constituencies with, let's say, two properties, one in one and one in the other,
Hmm.
and they're both registered as with their residents, and then they get like two postal votes.
Right.
Sorry, two ballot cards where they can go to, and they can and effectively you vote twice.
Right. Yeah, we have that problem as well.
Yeah,
Especially in the South, if I remember correctly.
right. So, I mean, again, you can add that to the list of million ways that you could
Yeah.
effectively rig the election. So yeah, that was one of the rationale because apparently there was the again the political uh, people's punditry, and I think even I think Rasmussen also they thought that the Californian vote for the Democrats was higher than they predicted, which sort of bucked the national trend. I mean, it doesn't really matter because like ultimately California was never going to be a red state back then. It's not going to be red now, but
Right.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, that was one thing that was being pointed out that maybe the popular vote um, Trump would have got it. I also think that Trump may have actually won Minnesota.
Really? Okay, that's an interesting one because Minnesota has been that part of the US, like not that northern area of the US is like that's the progressive part. That's the part that didn't give birth to the Progressive Party, but it was its cradle. That's the part that stood by like La Follette and FDR. That's the part that backed McGovern and LBJ. That's like I I find that one a bit harder to believe personally.
Mm.
Like I can perfectly see Minnesota and Wisconsin going blue in any election just because of how lefty they are. But
Yes.
I
But
mean,
how much of the values of those lefties do they share with Trump?
I don't know.
But that's the thing, because if you look at, and this is the thing that we maybe sometimes overlook, is Trump. I wouldn't class Trump as a conservative.
No, neither would I.
And so that means, like, the reason why Mitt Romney, I figure like Mitt Romney or McCain or Mitt Romney, when were unable to win those Rust Belt states, I think was the fact because they were conservatives and the
Oh, well,
values
wait,
that.
wait, 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 wait. Mitt Romney was not a conservative.
Okay, the closest thing to a conservative compared to Trump, let's just say.
I mean, this is the how are we defining conservative here?
Um, I would. I mean, like,
Because
I would say economically. Would you say economically? And okay, go on this. Okay, start with socially. Would you say that Mitt Romney was more socially conservative than Trump is?
no, and I would say that because yes, Romney is a Mormon. However, Romney also supports movements like Black Lives Matter and all this other crap. Trump does not. Romney would have gone out as soon as Romney would have gone out and said, "Oh, the alt right in this whatever rally was absolutely terrible. And anyone that says otherwise is an evil fascist." But and then he would make no mention of like Antifa or any other lefty force.
Hmm.
Trump would do something otherwise. These aren't explicit, but it is very implied which direction these guys lean.
Okay,
And I don't even think that Trump is a social conservative. I'm just saying that Romney is even farther to the left than Trump is on this issue.
but was Romney in 2012 the same Romney as he is today?
Uh, I mean, as same as they could be, considering the time differences. Like, we didn't have Antifa running around in 2012 to the extent that we do today. But if they were and they were starting these riots, I'm sure that Romney would be like bowing down to them. You have to remember, this is the same Romney, if I remember correctly, that governed Massachusetts, established
Yeah.
Romney Care as his medical policy, a state medical policy to combat Obamacare, which was just taking it farther. And he left like the right wing in America out to dry. I think that I think a lot of people really underestimate just how far to the left Romney was when compared to everyone else.
Okay, so economically, is Romney a Keynesian then?
Very much so. Very, very much so.
Would you say Trump is a Keynesian?
Not as much. Um,
Because I would say that I would say that well, Romney at the moment would be a Keynesian, and Trump
oh
is a
yeah, of
bit of a
course.
Keynesian. He is quite a bit of a
Um,
Keynesian.
yes, yes, and well, obviously, it's a bit hard to get elected on a platform that says stop printing money and cut spending. That that's the flaw of a democratic system. Like we're at the point right now where you will never get elected if you say we need to fix the money supply, or rather, who's even supplying the money, and we need to also fix all these other problems. No one cares, and the people that do care are not going to be your friends.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, they're both Keynesians. It's just to what degree. Romney essentially like socialized the healthcare in Massachusetts, and he was, if I remember correctly, he was in favor of a lot of the bailouts that happened, and he has been quite a large advocate of a lot of the socialist policies coming out of the Democratic Party. Trump, on the other hand, either by virtue of him being the opposition to the Democrats or by him being a bit more sensible, maybe, is not nearly as gung ho. Romney would not have lowered taxes, Trump did. And you can make arguments about tax cuts being valid from any economics perspective. I quite like lowering taxes to as close to zero as possible, if not to zero. But then again, I wouldn't have a federal government either. So Trump is a lot closer to the free market position than Romney is, certainly.
Mm. And so this is quite an interesting thing because so if you compared Obama to Romney, who would you say would be the ones furthest to the left,
I
socially
would
then?
say if you were to just take socially Obama,
Okay, so economically, would you say
economically I'd say they're about the same.
about the same? So that's quite an interesting one. So then the question is, why is it in 2012 did the Rust Belt uh, not vote with Romney then? That is the question.
That's because Romney ran a terrible campaign, and Obama had the like every organ of media on his side, and there was very little in the way of alternative. 2012 YouTube, it was an infant. 2012 blog posts were not getting read. You had the mainstream, and that was essentially it. And you had like the people you talked to. Romney was not likable. He was a snake. The evangelicals in the South didn't like him because he was a Mormon. The evangelicals in the South didn't like him because he like flip flopped on policy position, was to the left of them. The Midwesterners did not like Romney because he was an insider. The Rust Belt didn't like Romney because of a whole host of reasons, ranging from what his environmental policy would be to oh, this guy's a closeted racist, to like it depends on the state. But Romney was just a terrible pick. Quite honestly, I think Romney was the worst pick for the Republican Party since probably since Thomas E. Dewey, who was the guy they ran 3 times in the 40s and 50s or
Yeah,
30s and 50s. Sorry,
against was it FDR, wasn't it?
FDR and Truman. Yeah.
Yeah, FDR Truman. Yeah, I mean that is interesting. So I mean, and because we know from polling that the Rust Belt has this really interesting mix of it leans conservative, but it also has
It's a mixed bag.
Democrat. I don't want to say Democrat conservatives, but um, Democrats who are, I guess, the radical left in the party would describe as conservative Democrats if
Yeah.
they were to vote
Here's
Democrats.
the way you can put it: unionists.
Union people. Socially to the right,
Yep.
economically to the left, quite a bit to
Yep.
the left, in fact. Which is what the Red Wall Labour voter here in the UK were. They were, and this is where the Conservatives in this country are fucking up quite a
Yep.
bit because they they think that the Red Wall voter is economically to the right and socially to the left. In fact, it's the other way around. They are socially to the right and economically to the left,
Right.
and so they constantly mix it up. And they what they'll do is they'll do economically to the left and socially to the left, but they'll never do it socially to the right. They just won't do it. They haven't got the balls to do it, which is disappointing because
Right.
they would do quite well here in the UK, but no, I mean that was the thing that we know about the Rust Belt, which is it socially, yeah, the union vote. It is, I mean, that is the important vote in the Rust Belt for any candidate, and I think where the Republicans I think will do well now and into the future is that that vote will be the vote that would, I would imagine, unless something drastically changed in the Democrats, will just naturally go to the Republicans. On a presidential level, that is, I can't say what will happen congressional or senatorial because obviously that's all different anyway. But yeah,
Right. So it's that's the issue essentially.
that is the issue, and the more that the Democrats continue on their progressive crusade, the more that they alienate certain groups. I mean,
That's
would you say Hispanics have been sort of alienated by Democrats at this point?
um depends which generation. The earlier generation of Hispanic immigrants have definitely been alienated, and they are the ones that will vote red. but the second, sometimes second, definitely the third and fourth, or the longer here generations of Hispanics will go right along with the Democratic Party. And that's because the longer that a Hispanic stays in the United States, the less likely they are to hold on to their religion, especially if they're in my generation, or at least the less likely they are to adhere to it. My generation is a very, very, very godless generation. So these aren't like the based Hispanic Catholics or whatever. They are these are basically just globo homo voting block number 2 Hispanics.
Yeah. Okay. But that again, I mean, one thing I will talk about the black vote, but of course, Trump is doing quite well with the Hispanic vote as well, especially in Florida amongst Cubans. That's like the main one. But he's up in, I mean, approval rating wise, he's up. So that'll be interesting to see if that materializes anyway. I mean, again, if you include, I think Venezuelans would probably be included in that. So as I said, I can't imagine like 70% Venezuelans are going to vote for Biden and Democrats.
Yeah, I can tell you that.
I can't. I don't think they'll be that. They're foolish. So what I've got up on screen here is the National Model Party vote share, the running totals. And you got like 2016, you got the midterms, and you got what you got at the moment. So again, one thing that the mainstream have been looking at, as probably a final point here, is that if you compare all three, and this is where I think where the idea of a Biden landslide is coming from, is they look at like the first couple of days where the Democrats right out of the gate have quite a huge lead. I mean, it's like 65, nearly 70% of in the first couple of days when it comes to the early voting.
Right.
And
they
but
quickly lose,
expected.
or at least it evens out at the very least.
Yeah, and this is the thing, because I mean, like similar thing happened here. It was a bit more even, and then what happened was the Republican one, started to shrink in 2016, and obviously until election day, 2018, it was the opposite. The Republicans right out of the gate had a lead on early voting, but this time it's starting to, as you said, it's starting to even out, but it started to. And this is where it's getting interesting, is the Republicans are, unlike the previous time where it's like an even line, it's just flat.
Yeah.
The Republicans are starting to gain, and that's where the interesting thing is coming from, because they are gaining at the expense of the Democrats.
Yep. The cynical part of me wants to know, with all the mail-in voting and all of that, were the people in like Republican neighborhoods and all of that, were they getting their mail-in ballots and all of that later than the Democrats were? Generate like a news or a scare or something like that.
Wouldn't surprise me. That was something that that's definitely a possibility. I know that in some states there were Republican, like again in Georgia, I am told the Republican Party there are quite incompetent.
Oh well, yeah, of course.
They're quite incompetent and they're just really disorganized. And again, that's why you have this thing of constantly, oh, Georgia's going to go, it's going to go blue, it's going to go blue. And it's like, no, it's not going to go blue. It's just the Republicans there are really incompetent. They just need better management on the ground there. I think I think there's also Republicans like in Florida and such, where they were told not to vote early, go vote on the day to make sure your ballot is really counted. And same in certain states. So, and this is where the interesting thing is, we currently at this moment in time, the Democrats really needed to to remain in the race, they needed to have like a consistent pattern
Right.
of early votes. And they haven't. They've actually gone down, and each day as they've gone down, it's harder for Biden's path to victory. And the further he goes down, the more on the day he needs to have a pretty big turnout. I mean, turnout has to be greater than that of 2016. It has to be a lot greater than 2016.
Oh yeah, no, that's something else that these models don't predict as well, is how many of these people are actually going to go out to vote. What's the turnout going to be like? I want to know, because if
They're
people
not.
thought, like the average normie thought in 2016, oh, both my options are terrible, woe is me. What are they thinking now?
Well, I don't think they're going to be voting Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah, I don't either for some reason.
I don't think a lot of libertarians are going to be voting Joe Jorgensen. That's a good question. We don't know. When it comes to the independents, and this is the other important thing I need to stress: we don't know where they're going. It gives us a clue where they're going to as you get later on, because they remain. Let's have a look. Unaffiliated. They consistently sit at 10%, like 9.9, 10%. And this is the interesting thing: if they're remaining at 10%, and the undecideds or unaffiliated aren't moving, but the Republicans are moving and the Democrats are going down, that would suggest that Democrats here in this model are voting Republican.
Well, yes. Who could have seen that coming?
Yes, exactly. And that's the interesting thing, because you would expect, in most normal circumstances, that as you see here, unaffiliated is at 15, it's at 14, 15%, and then it starts to drop and it starts to drop, and then you would see both parties sort of cannibalizing both until a point where you see which has the edge over each other, and we haven't seen that yet.
Right.
And there's the two possibilities with the unaffiliated, which most pollsters in that I've been looking at and who probably in our circles agree on, is that they know, the undecideds know who they're going to vote for, and they're just not telling us, and they're not telling us for multiple reasons. Number one, they don't trust pollsters. Number two, they don't want to tell people, because if they tell people, social pressures. I mean, let's be honest. I think it was talked on the unpopular opinions. What incentive do you have to tell somebody you're a Trump voter?
Yeah, exactly.
Because what happens to Trump voters that we know of, if you're going to be voting Trump, you could get cancelled in whatever job you do. You could be attacked. You could be shot now for wearing a MAGA hat. So you will keep, and then if you're a Democrat or a Biden supporter, I mean, what social repercussions do you have from being a Democrat or a Biden supporter? You got none.
Right.
Well, unless you're like, I guess, where you're living in Oklahoma, maybe they'll be like, you give like the one Democrat in the town a dodgy look.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Or
and
teachers, the school teachers and all that. Like you just kind of stay clear of them after you deal with public school matters or whatever.
yeah, yeah. We had a previous chap on this stream called Staff Sergeant Sniper, and he's in Utah, and he was jokingly saying that his neighbors are Democrats, and they sort of run from the car to the house and back and forth,
Right. Yeah.
because he's in quite a strong Republican area. So they for some reason they put up Biden stuff on their front lawn. So so maybe in those circumstances you can say there's an incentive not to, like in red states, but by and large, I mean, I think Biden supporters will be more willing to come forward and admit that they do support Democrats and Biden. But this is the thing. It ultimately, will probably sum it up here. Actually,
Yeah.
that it does depend on turnout. And the thing there is, we are told by the mainstream media if there's high turnout, or that means a Biden victory. It doesn't, because this is the crazy thing. 53% of Democrats have already voted. If you take the last election in place, if you take the last election results plus, or 53% of Democrats have already voted, and that you
Wow.
would expect to vote. Yeah. Now the Republican one, I could not find that, and maybe there's a reason why it's not being shared. I don't want to make an estimate because because the independents are leaning quite heavily to the Republicans at this moment in time, so I'm not going to make a guess. But the suggestion that Republican vote they're just cannibalizing it in the early voting is just not true, because the majority of Republicans are going to turn out and vote on the day.
Right. Yeah. As usual.
As usual, because there's no, even with COVID and everything else there, I mean, you might have I know from there are like a few odd Republicans who were, I guess you could say, elderly, that are doing like mail-in because they, obvious reasons, they don't wait in line all day, it's
Right.
cold, it's November, and the usual stuff. But the path for victory in that case, if that is true, and 53% of Democrat voters have already voted, then the path for victory for Biden is looking ever more impossible. And I just can't see I can't see a Biden win unless they rig the vote and steal the election.
And neither can I. Is that all the points that you had to cover?
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to go on?
I believe that I have covered everything that I wanted to throughout the course of this stream.
That is.
I don't mean to cut things short or anything. It is getting late for me over here.
Yeah, that's all right. No, it's about like 12:30 in the morning over here. So I'll wrap it up now as well. I'll just go through. There's somebody who's he comes on here stream locally. Plebeian. Hi, Al Shatori. I'm a former Momentum Labour chap who got thrown out of the West Midlands between too patriotic to turn up. I'm also an Anglican who super chatted a religion stream. The point I wanted to make is Labour having 500,000 members make them the largest political party in Europe. As former Momentum members, most of them are Fox members, Trots who join for Jezza. I'm a local Tory youth member. US Red Wall us Red Wall has taken over the local youth wing of the Tory party here in the West Midlands. Half of us are pushing late 20s soon on to the party. Well, good for you. Keep up what you're doing. I was just say during one final question I actually have during election time. Well, I imagine it's. What percentage would you say a Democrat Party is like made up of like Trots and Marxists and sociopaths?
I don't know about percentages, but they are in the leadership in quite high numbers.
Yeah,
the actual percentage of the party itself, probably very little, but leadership, probably over half.
So like your average like registered.
Your average Democrat, I think, is very well intentioned. Like the average person that votes Democrat, I do not think has a lick of harm in him, but the leadership is the thing you have to worry about that's actually driving the whole thing to hell.
So if an AOC figure ever became the presidential candidate, would that be a bridge too far for like some Democrats?
Right now, yes. If they were to have ran AOC this election, it would probably be another Nixon slide over the electoral map. So, right now AOC much too radical. She would lose basically any state that has any sort of mining, oil, or manufacturing. She might gain the Midwest and New England. She would not get the South or the Midwest. or sorry, Northeast. She would get the Northeast and the West Coast. She would not get the Midwest South. She would not get the Rust Belt. Most of the Atlantic, I don't think would even vote with her. Like I don't think Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas. I don't even think Virginia would vote with her, or Maryland. I think she would just get her like progressive sitting in their ivory towers in New England and the West Coast.
Yeah, Virginia is an interesting one because that one has experienced quite a large influx
Yes.
of people, and also you have. Actually, this is a thing I would just before we go. I'm sorry because it is getting late, but
Oh no, it's fine.
one thing I was going to say, which again is not being talked about, is and correct me if I'm wrong. How the college? Well, we have universities, but the colleges, I guess the equivalent in the United States, there are
Mhm.
they open in the US at all, or are they shut down?
It's a case by case basis. There are some open and some closed. Like you've probably heard the viral Harvard is still charging full fees for online classes this next
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
So there are universities that are most certainly shut down, but there are also universities that have stayed open, or at least nominally stayed open.
Yes, because I was going to say that the some of those swing states and some of those states where which are close
Hmm.
but not classed as swing have like I know that New Hampshire has quite it's got quite a university college several colleges. Virginia's got that as well, and I'm just wondering when you haven't got like the Democrat Party activist trooper um, in the colleges able to go about the activist work like they would normally do at election time. I also think that there might be an effect from that as well. Maybe I don't know. I think there might be some effect from that.
Well, yeah, it's going to inhibit them, but I think they probably had this stuff in mind whenever they decided to shut everything down.
Yeah. Um, and again, so that was probably one of my final points. I was just going to say it was something that no one's really talked about was because of I mean like in here in UK, much of the Labour Party's activist base are university
Yep.
higher education students. It's usually the students who are um, who pretty much do the legwork for the party on the ground. So I don't know if it's the same that with the Democrats if they rely heavily on students.
Um, Probably not as bad, but yes, they're very much a university centered party.
Yeah, I mean Labour Party here in UK has gone completely down the university centric. I mean, because they've just lost the remainders of the working class have gone, and they're just down to the bare basics of the university vote. Um, So, I mean, there's my prediction for the future for the Democrats. They'll lose so badly they'll just retain the university, the students. Um, so that's my prediction there. um, I think Plebeians just come back and said donate super Streamlabs and such. Yeah, I don't think I'm big enough to have super chats or Streamlabs yet. Maybe one day.
Oh, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. But I think we'll call it a night there, actually. So before you go, Tim, is there anything you'd like to show?
No, not yet. Yet trademarked, but no, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, that's fair enough. Again, thank you for coming on. And unfortunately, as I said, Charlemagne had technical issues, so he wasn't able to come on tonight. But I'm sure we'll
Never
have him in
mind.
the future.
Yeah,
Maybe I know he said he was going to go down to Virginia to film like I think he joked about filming Black Lives Matter riots, so maybe he's been kidnapped by the maybe being kidnapped by the hordes of Antifa, and he was sending me like a coded message to
no,
tell me.
save me, SOS, help.
That's
Yeah,
yeah, wink, wink, and so yeah, so But no, I think it's quite good tonight. I've actually enjoyed this. I've been looking forward to this stream because I wanted to vent some of my frustration and actually look through like some of the numbers and just say.
Yeah, it
But
was
I
very
think
enjoyable. Thank you.
that's all right. But thank you for coming on, Turnip, and I am a fan of the Settlers Lament and the cigar streams and everything. So I watch those regularly. So
I'm quite glad.
and as I said, links to the Discord server and the ones that promote like the basket weavers and such will be in the description below. But until then, I will see you all next time. I think it'll be after the election, actually, come to think of it. And I'm not going to do a stream over the election because I wouldn't be able to stay awake. So I guess get out there and vote, and don't do a cringe walker, and don't. I mean, poor cringe walker, poor young cringe walker has turned to the dark side. And he's voted for the abortionist, so he's killed many younglings.
Was this in his archetype or his character arc? Could we have seen this coming?
Yeah, I was. I have to. I'm gonna have to go on like tell Owine, his co-host. I'll just say, I've seen Cringe Walker on a hologram killing younglings, or voting for a candidate to kill younglings. So, yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if he actually did vote it. I think he might have just said it. I'd be surprised if he did vote for the Democrats candidate congressional bit. He might have done.
It's quite an insane thing to do. Like I don't get it, to be quite honest.
No. I mean, he reassured me that he's not living in like AOC's district, so so I mean, it's like, I mean, if he voted for AOC, he would. I think he should be exiled from the from everything in the political circle. But no, but that's the important thing I'll say to, I guess, all the American viewers that you get from this and everything. Go out and vote, please.
But not for God, please.
Please do it for my country, because the Democrats are refusing to do trade with us over Brexit because they want to support the fucking IRA vote. So for God's sake, vote to save me and my company.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me on. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you. As I said, thank you for coming on, and I will see you all later. And have a good weekend, everybody.